Chapter 486. From the grasslands to the dry and barren land where the 1,000-grain gold was found, Xiao Xian used the knowledge Jiju taught him to identify herbs and told the tribesmen to prepare some. Along the way there were too many things. They were hunted down and there were all kinds of dangers in the forest. The injured had used up a lot of medicine. The medicine given by the Taiha tribe was almost gone. Although they had picked some herbs along the way, they couldn't withstand the huge consumption. Now they didn't have much medicine left. Those who had not awakened their totemic power, as well as the elderly, would inevitably fall ill after a long period of time. It had been 20 days since they set off from the tribe. There was still a long way to go and they had to keep going. Naturally, they had to prepare more herbs. Xiao Xian taught the tribesmen how to identify the herbs in this area. If they encountered any, they had to pick them and prepare. Looking up at the sky, Xiao Xian noticed a bird flying high in the sky. He could not see what it looked like. It flew too high and nimbly. Even arrows would not be able to shoot it down. "What's wrong?" asked Zheng Luo as he walked over. That bird appeared again. Xiao Xian pointed at the shadow in the sky. Again. Zheng Luo was alert. It must be someone's pet or it's tracking our movements. "Chief, why do you think the people from Royal City haven't appeared yet?" asked Xiao Xian. "You mean that bird belongs to Royal City?" Zheng Luo fell silent. He wasn't someone who didn't know anything. He knew that once the people in King City decided to deal with someone, they would definitely take action. The people they had met before were just tentacles that the people in King City had released first. Since other people could track the movements of the Flaming Horn tribe, the people of King City must know something. They didn't show up, maybe they were waiting for the best time. "They're here too?" asked Zheng Luo. Although it was a question, Zheng Luo was already 50% sure. The Royal City's people aren't used to the forest, so they haven't made a move yet. They're probably waiting for us to leave the forest and go to an open area before making a move. Xiao Xian thought about the terrain of the place they had passed through when they first came here. After leaving this barren mountain, we will pass through a more open area with more people. The road is also relatively flat. Only after passing through that area will we enter the semi-desert area. The people from the Royal City are most likely to appear on the road in the middle. Zheng Luo's heart sank. Although they didn't like the pretentious people in King City, they had to admit that the 6 aristocratic families, who used to be the strongest tribes, were definitely not to be underestimated, to be able to take down their current territory and develop to such a scale. There were children, old people, and women who hadn't awakened yet. They couldn't let go of the battle at all, nor could they give up on these people. As for the solution, the only way was to leave some people behind to block the Royal City's pursuit team, and let the rest of the tribe continue their journey. Against the people from the Royal City, it was very likely that they would never be able to keep up with the team. They couldn't even be cremated. However, for the tribe, sacrifices were inevitable. Even Zheng Luo was prepared to stay behind. "We have to arrange for some people to stay behind the team." Zheng Luo looked at the barren mountains around them and said, "I'll discuss this with Duokong." While the team was hurrying, Zheng Luo talked to the warriors according to the situation of each family. Some families were supported by one person, so they definitely couldn't let him stay behind the team. Zheng Luo calculated that to temporarily block the Royal City's team, at least 1,000 people would be needed. Otherwise it wouldn't be of much use. Zheng Luo wanted to add himself, but he was the chief and had to lead the team. Even if he wanted to, the others wouldn't allow it. How could a team without a leader move forward? Should they appoint a new chief now? "I'll just join." "Brother, you lead the team and keep moving," said Zheng Cheng as he strode over. Although Zheng Cheng was rash, he wasn't much weaker than Zheng Luo. Otherwise, he wouldn't have competed with Zheng Luo for the position of chief. Usually, the two brothers didn't see eye to eye. Now Zheng Cheng stood up. Zheng Luo looked at his younger brother and suddenly felt his eyes sting. He opened his mouth to speak but was interrupted by Zheng Cheng. "Don't talk nonsense." "That's it. How many people are there?" "Let me see." Zheng Cheng snatched the name sheet from Zheng Luo's hand. "Oh, Duokong and Guangyi are here too. Wuxia is here too. Not bad, not bad. There's also Zhui, he's got guts. And Xiao Xian. That's not right. Brother, why is Xiao Xian's name on this? How can you put Xiao Xian's name on this? You're getting more and more muddle-headed as a chief." Zheng Cheng took the opportunity to scold his brother. Zheng Luo was stunned too. He snatched the sheet back. He had told everyone about it during the break. Then, he placed the sheet on a rock for those who met the requirements and were willing to stay to write their names on it. There were too many people there, so he didn't notice. When did Xiao Xian write his name? Anyone in the team could stay, even Zheng Luo. Only 2 people couldn't stay. One was the shamaness. Many things couldn't be done without the shamaness. This time the shamaness had to be with them. The other person was Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was the tribe's elder, and wore the ancestral bone ornaments. If they wanted to bring the tribe back to the old land, other than the shamaness, they couldn't do it without Xiao Xian. Plus Xiao Xian was from there. Without Xiao Xian, even if they could go back, it would be difficult. They didn't know anything about the other side. Cross it off, cross it off. Hurry up and cross off Xiao Xian's name. Zheng Cheng dug out a ball of dark green mud from somewhere and pasted it on Xiao Xian's name. In the next few days, the team continued on their journey. Zheng Luo continued to check the name list to see if they met his requirements. When they were about to leave the barren mountains, Zheng Luo gave the final name list. These 1,000 people would be at the back of the team. If they encountered people from Royal City, they would have to hold them off. They would be the tribe's last shield against the Royal City's spears. There was a mournful atmosphere in the team. However, they had already explained everything in the past few days. These people knew what they had to do and the possible consequences. Zheng Luo finished reporting the name list and gave a simple explanation. He put away the cloth and wiped his red eyes. Although he had seen many casualties along the way, this time, it was not the small forces from before. It was a tough battle. As the leader, Zheng Luo felt sad too. However, in order to go back, the necessary sacrifices had to be made. If there was a need later, he would step up himself. He rubbed his eyes and opened them to see Xiao Xian standing in front of him. Knowing why, Zheng Luo coughed. Xiao Xian, you know that everyone else in our tribe can stay, including me. We can all stay behind. Only you and the shamaness can't. If not, who's going to lead the tribe back to the old land? Xiao Xian paused. I just want to try. Try what? Zheng Luo was confused. If we meet people from Royal City, I want to try to stop them. If I can't, I can at least cause them some trouble. You? What trouble do you want to cause them? No, you want to borrow the power of our ancestors. Zheng Luo glared at Xiao Xian. Yes. Xiao Xian nodded. No, you want to borrow the power of our ancestors to bring the tribe back. You can't risk it here. It wasn't easy for us to get here. You can't gamble with this. Zheng Luo refused firmly. If our ancestors were here, they wouldn't want everyone to die here just to go back. Chief, you know that I can survive a king beast. If people from Royal City come, I can survive too. Plus, I can make it easier for the warriors and buy more time for the team. No. The ancestors agreed. You ask the bone ornament if you don't believe me. Xiao Xian took it off and handed it to Zheng Luo. Zheng Luo's facial muscles twitched. How the hell did he have the ability to communicate with his ancestors? It was always the shamaness who communicated with them. Seeing that Xiao Xian was still staring at him, Zheng Luo looked at the bone ornament in front of him, then turned his head and waved his hand. Go find the shamaness. We'll do whatever she says. Xiao Xian grinned. The shamaness wouldn't object. Indeed, the shamaness didn't object. When she heard Xiao Xian say he wanted to stay behind, she stared at Xiao Xian expressionlessly for almost 10 minutes. Xiao Xian's forehead was sweating. Finally, she said lightly, go. If it wasn't for the bulging veins on the back of her hand from gripping her walking stick too hard, people would have thought she was as calm as she looked. No one could be calm at a time like this. They were confused and uncertain about their future, worried and anxious about what was to come. However, they had already come this far. There was no turning back. Walking out of this barren mountain, the view became wider and more human. Because people often walked on the grass, several clear paths were formed. There were also some clear ruts on the ground. The people around them were all trading teams from different tribes. However, compared to He Xiong's caravans, they were much smaller. They were just trading teams from smaller tribes. The largest group had less than 100 people, while the smallest group only had 20 or 30 people. When they saw the Yinjiao team, they all looked over curiously. They had never seen the Yinjiao people before. They were just curious about where this team had come from. They looked like they had traveled a long way. Their clothes were dirty and their faces were tired, but it couldn't hide their aura. They were not to be trifled with. That was the first impression they had. Thus, these people lowered their heads and hurried away. They were worried that the Yinjiao people would steal their goods. Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. The bird was no longer there. But that didn't mean they had given up on watching. In fact, they didn't think there was a need to do so. They were almost here. Chapter 487. As if feeling the tension and danger in the air, the small caravans quickened their pace again. Although everything was calm now, there was an inexplicable sense of trepidation that made them unable to calm down. Something was about to happen. The cows and horses that were pulling the carts were still anxiously stomping their hooves. They even wanted to deviate from their original route and run to the side, but they were forcefully pulled back. A cart-pulling beast that looked like a deer that had lost its antlers was snorting from its nose. It seemed to have a bad temper. It kept raising its head as if it was about to stand up. The people around had to go and suppress it. What's going on? I don't know, it seems to be going crazy. Not just us, look at the side. As far as the eyes could see, all the beasts that were pulling the carts, including the docile ones and the irritable ones, all had similar changes. It was as if they were trying to escape even more so than before. The horses neighed and the beasts roared. It was chaos. What's going on? Someone couldn't help but shout. Wait, listen. Rumble. There seemed to be a rumbling sound coming from afar. The ground was shaking. Although it was not obvious now, there was indeed movement. The cautious people pulled the carts and horses, standing in place and looking around cautiously. Some even turned back to look at the tribe that they had seen not long ago. Was it them? No, it wasn't. The sound came from another direction. Not long after, the sound became more and more obvious. Even those who had not awakened their totemic power could hear it clearly. In the distance, there was a cloud of dust at the intersection of heaven and earth. Because most of the surroundings were grasslands, there was not much dust, but it was still very obvious. A huge team of thousands appeared. The metal armors and weapons under Yang Guang's gaze reflected a dazzling light. It was as if the entire team was shrouded in light. As the team moved forward, layer by layer, like the ripples on the surface of a lake. Looking from afar, a rough estimate showed that this team should be no less than 4,000 people. It did not sound like a lot, but in this relatively small place where most tribes only had 1,000 or 2,000 people, such a well-equipped team that seemed to be strong could easily wipe out any tribe here. Gulp. The people who saw this swallowed their saliva. At this moment they did not even know what to say. After living in such a remote place for so long, they had never seen such a scene before. A member of the nobility? Only the nobles had such luxurious equipment. But why did so many people come to this place? Regardless of why these people were here, seeing that the group was getting closer and closer, they hurriedly called for the people of the trading team to hide. This group was even more terrifying than the migrating group they had just seen. After all, there were many elderly, children, and women in the migration team they had seen earlier. However, this team was almost entirely made up of warriors who had come to fight. Dodge. Get out of the way. Those who were driving the carriages and those who were moving the goods hurriedly moved to the side, hoping that they would not block the path of these people. Rumble. It was as if thunder was approaching. The giant beast, which was much thicker than 4 people stacked on top of each other, vigorously swung its 4 limbs and ran on the grass. To it, this was just a small jog. The tremors caused by his large feet stomping on the ground caused even the grass on the ground to be shaken up. Inside the cabin of the biggest car, Yi Zong frowned and looked doubtfully at the square plate in front of him. He reached out and grabbed a handful of fine golden sand from a clay bowl beside him and sprinkled it on the square plate. The fine golden sand spontaneously separated into stripes on the square plate. The stripes were exactly where the lines were drawn on the square plate. The fine golden sand was still moving. Some moved closer to the jade stone, while others moved away. However, it did not take long for the changes to stop. Then, with a soft pop, the golden sand in the square plate spontaneously dispersed. What's wrong, Yizong? Did the divination come out? Several people next to him came over and asked. Yinjiao is just ahead. It's just that I can't divine anything more. Yi Zong's indifferent face showed a rare conflicted expression. He wanted to divine more, but it was as if there was a layer of fog. Every time he divined, it was a mess. The jade stone in the square plate could not form a result. It was very chaotic, especially when it came to the young Yanjiao elder. He really could not divine anything at all. At first, it was understandable that he couldn't divine anything. But now, the more he understood, the more he could divine. He should have been able to divine something useful, but other than the general movements of the Flaming Horn tribe, he couldn't divine anything else. Yi Zong had heard from Yi Bing that Yi Bing had divined something about the Yanjiao in the tower beside the royal city's gate, but he could not divine anything. Now the same thing was happening to Yi Zong. It was unbelievable. No wonder the Yi family had always been on guard against the Yanjiao tribe. The Yanjiao tribe really made them feel uneasy. If this uneasy factor was not removed, it was believed that many people in the Yi family would not be able to live peacefully. Yi Bing, after returning from the tower, seemed to have hit a bottleneck and could not make any further progress. The elders also said in private that if Yi Bing could not break through this bottleneck, he would be stuck here. For the Yi family, they would give up on cultivating him. Thinking about Yi Bing's situation, Yi Zong picked up a jade stone in the square plate and slowly rubbed it, thinking. The girl in leather armor next to him was about to ask something, but suddenly her expression changed. She opened the animal skin bag hanging on her waist and reached out to take out a creature that looked like a bee. It was the size of a thumb and had an oval body. At this moment, this small flying insect was lying in the girl's hand, facing one direction and flapping its wings. Although it had wings, they were too small compared to its fat body. Could not fly at all. The movement of its wings was just a reflection of its mood at this moment. It was excited. There are fire crystals. The girl in leather armor said. This fat flying insect would only behave like this when it smelled the fire crystals. Looking at the direction it was facing, it was the direction they were heading. It must be the Yanjiao people. The Yanjiao people had salt and fire crystals. They must have brought them with them when they were migrating. The others in the carriage were also in high spirits. I wonder how many fire crystals the Yanjiao people have. Compared to the excitement of the others, Yi Zong was still silent. He was not interested in the fire crystals. What he really cared about was whether the Yanjiao tribe had a better divination ability than the Yi family, and the reason why his divination had always failed. For the Yi family, the fire crystals were not very helpful. Fire crystals were the favorite of fighting tribes. Even if they had fire crystals, most of them were given to people who worked for them. Warriors were human beings and wise men were the best. The Yi family had always thought so. They were willing to be wise men and leave the physical work to others. The insect in the girl's hand was flapping its wings faster and faster. We're close. The Yanjiao people are nearby. The girl in leather armor lifted the curtain and looked out, ignoring the dust outside. Yanjiao people. They're Yanjiao people. The rest of the people in the carriage also lifted the curtains and looked forward. In front of them, about 800 paces away, stood a row of people. When the small caravans passing by were trying to avoid them, this row of people stood out. Although they could not see their faces clearly, the people in the carriage could guess who they were. They must be Yanjiao people. Why are there so few of them? They must have known we were coming, so they were prepared. It doesn't look like they were in a hurry. Yi Zong looked up. He could not be sure if the Yanjiao people were guessing or divining. No matter what, this hidden threat had to be removed. He did not want to end up like Yi Bing. As long as Yanjiao was wiped off the face of this world, the so-called obstacles and interference would cease to exist. The carriage pulled by the giant beast slowed down, allowing the other warriors to rush forward. As for the fear that the Yanjiao people were setting up traps, there was no need. Based on their calculations, the Yanjiao people did not have the time to set up such traps. In the carriage behind them, the fox and a few other leaders of tribes who had sided with the royal city during the winter came out. Those who sided with the royal city had to show their sincerity and value. They had sent many people to Yanjiao this time. Of the 5,000 people, 2,000 were from these tribes. The fox leader looked at the row of people in front of him, his eyes filled with hatred. They had lost the fire crystals and the salt mines. Even their remaining treasures had been handed over to the Yi family and the nobles of the royal city when they sided with the royal city. As the leader of a tribe, he had to put on a smiling face in front of those brats from the royal city. What a disgrace. These losses, he would get back from the people of the Flaming Horns tribe. The salt, fire crystals and other things that he had lost, he would get them back with his own hands. The people in front received the order and sped up. The rumbling of hooves carried murderous intent as they galloped forward. Behind the first wave of cavalry, more warriors followed. Seeing the people in front charge past, the fox leader, who was watching from the carriage, smirked. From today onwards, the Yinjiao tribe would disappear from the face of this world. None of the people the royal city wanted to deal with were still alive. Some of the small caravans watched from afar. Even from afar, they could imagine the ferocious aura that the people standing on that path had to endure. The Yinjiao people who were directly facing this group felt it even more strongly. The ground was about to shake. Avoiding it could save them from danger temporarily. But could they avoid it now? Avoiding it meant that they would be hunted down endlessly. They could not avoid it. Even if all of them died in battle, they could not avoid it. Zheng Cheng raised his eyebrows. This was his first time taking on such an important task. Holding the heavy sword in his hand, Zheng Cheng's eyes flashed coldly. Feeling the ground shake more and more violently, Zheng Cheng took a deep breath and raised the arm holding the sword. He was about to say something when Xiao Xian said, "All of you back off. I'll go first." Zheng Cheng, who had been about to shout out his courage, Zheng Cheng stopped himself and looked at Xiao Xian as if he did not understand. He wanted to ask something but Duo Kong dragged him back. Chapter 488. What was going on? Looking at the row of people retreating, whether it was the people watching from the beast carriages or the small caravans watching from afar, they were all puzzled. Could it be that there was actually an ambush? Or had they changed their minds and decided to retreat? And not everyone retreated. There was still one person standing there. Whether it was the people from the small caravan, the cavalry that was charging forward, or the people who were watching the battle from the beast-drawn carriages, none of them could believe their eyes. What were the Yinjiao people planning? Why did they all retreat, leaving only one person standing there? Xiao Xian from Yinjiao. Someone who recognized Xiao Xian shouted. He's Xiao Xian? The Yinjiao boy who sent Luzong flying with one slap? The girl in leather armor looked at the figure in front of her. I heard that the boy is very close to Jingu from the Ji family. Aren't you afraid that Jingu will be angry if you kill him? A young man twirling his sword asked the girl next to him. The girl didn't care. Jingu doesn't interfere with politics. He only knows how to farm. He doesn't even know that the royal city is sending troops. By the time he finds out, the boy is already dead. Is Xiao Xian from Yinjiao really that powerful? Another person asked. The young man with the sword looked forward. With a twist of his wrist, the blade drew an arc and sliced a piece of grass that had been kicked away by the beast's hooves in half. I'd like to see how powerful that brat is. Some of the royal city troops had seen what happened at the city gates. They admitted that Xiao Xian from Yinjiao was indeed powerful. But that was then. The situation now was completely different. This boy dared to fight alone? He had a death wish. Xiao Xian sheathed his sword in the scabbard on his back and took out the bone ornament necklace around his neck. Ancestor, it's up to you now. From the day the tribe started migrating, Xiao Xian could feel the sound coming from the bone ornaments. No one else could hear it, but it sounded like a flame being blown by the wind. Xiao Xian sensed anger from the 4 bone ornaments. Did bone ornaments have emotions? Even if he didn't, it was possible that he did. After all, he was the incarnation of the ancestor and represented the will of the ancestor. He took the risk to stand here because he felt the bone ornament's anger. That was why he made this decision. The tall warhorse stomped its hooves, getting closer and closer. The knight on the horse was holding a spear that glowed with a bloodthirsty cold light. Xiao Xian could even smell the flying dust. In the face of the suffocating killing intent and the seemingly unstoppable offensive, Xiao Xian, who stood there alone, was as insignificant as a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Xiao Xian's eyes were wide open in the face of this fierce attack. He stared straight ahead, secretly calculating in his heart. It was getting closer. It was getting closer. The charging knights aimed their spears at Xiao Xian. The bone ornaments made even louder sounds. Whoosh whoosh, It sounded like a prairie fire being blown by the wind. Only Xiaoxian could hear it. Now was the time. Xiaoxian's totemic power and power of inheritance were activated to the maximum in an instant. The muscles all over his body twitched rapidly. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the thumping sounds like the beating of war drums. Yi Zong, who was in the carriage, sensed something. His eyelids twitched and he stood up in shock. Because he was in such a hurry, he knocked over the tray in front of him and didn't even look at it. The charging knights raised their spears and were about to plunge them down in the next moment. But soon their cold pupils constricted. Above their pupils flames were reflected. The flames were like dragons flying out, dancing and twisting together, shooting straight into the sky. An unprecedented aura erupted from Xiaoxian's body. A scorching aura swept across, and the air seemed to be burning. The charging troops seemed to have met an invisible hand, blocking their advance. Some of them almost fell off their horses. What kind of aura was this? It made people tremble in fear, and their scalps tingled. Whoosh! In the instant the flames expanded. A giant covered in flames seemed to walk out of thin air, looking down at everything on the ground. The world in front of him seemed to be dyed in flames, covered with a layer of fire. Xiaoxian looked ahead and lifted his foot. The giant flaming man also lifted his foot from the flames. Then, following Xiaoxian's foot, he stomped down. Boom! The powerful force in the midst of the unprecedented aura left a huge crater in the ground and made a shocking sound like thunder. The soil on the ground was peeled off and crushed like a huge firework. The hard rocks under the soil were also stepped on, and the sound of cracking was deafening. A crack that seemed to tear the entire ground plate rushed from the crater to the front. It was like a fast-growing branch, constantly branching out, and branching out again and again. The hard rocks on the ground were blown up by the force of the vibration, tumbling in the air, and gravel flew everywhere. The charging troops, along with their horses, were blown away by the exploding rocks. They were unable to escape. Men and horses were thrown off their feet, and even their screams were drowned out by the roar of the earth. The whole world seemed to have been turned upside down. The earth trembled. The grass that had taken root due to the drought seemed to have been pulled out at the moment of the tremors. It swayed in the air, shattered into pieces, and dissipated with the air waves. The rocks that were blown up from the cracked ground flew in the direction of the royal city troops. Faced with the high-speed flying rocks, the troops panicked. The giant beast that pulled the carriage roared, and its huge body shook. Its two front legs almost knelt under the tremors of the ground. Bang! A rock the size of a human head hit the side of the carriage, creating a dent. The carriage almost fell apart. If it weren't for the fact that the carriage was mostly made of metal, it wouldn't have been able to withstand the impact. The young man holding the sword trembled and almost dropped it. He stared at the flame giant with wide eyes. He had wanted to fight the kid himself, but now, a few pieces of cloth around the carriage were torn off. They danced in the air with the airwaves. That's fierce. The people in the carriage jumped out of the beast carriage. Under the protection of the guards, they quickly retreated and dodged the attacks. They could hear the sound of flying rocks and the sound of falling rocks. Just listening to these sounds was enough to make people fearful. In the back of the carriage, the fox leader, who was holding on to the side of the carriage to steady himself, also trembled. His eyes were so wide open that they seemed to be about to pop out. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was this the power? Was this the power that Yan Jiao used to escape from the king beast? No wonder they could escape safely from the salt flats. No wonder the king beast couldn't stop them. No wonder they couldn't even find a body. This was it. The fox leader's usually cunning face was contorted with hatred. He could not take this lying down. He wanted to take back what he had lost from Yan Jiao. But he didn't even have the courage to charge forward. Retreat! The leader roared. They couldn't attack. The only thing they could do was retreat. No one could advance in the face of such power. Only death awaited them. The horses that had luckily escaped the fate of being flung away neighed in panic. The riders couldn't calm them down in a short time. All they could do was grab onto the horses' necks to avoid being thrown off. They left the battlefield together with the horses. Instinctively, the horses galloped away from the danger. Some of them tripped over cracks in the ground, some were hit by flying stones, and some were knocked away by their panicked companions. The people from the small caravan who were watching from afar were all hiding behind their vehicles. They were far away, so there were no big rocks coming at them. However, there were flying pebbles and dust. The strong airwaves were so strong that they couldn't even open their eyes. One could only imagine what kind of impact those who were close to them were enduring. Everyone who had witnessed the scene was still in disbelief. It was as if they were hallucinating. Their hearts were still racing and their legs were shaking. They couldn't even stand up. Xiao Xian felt the totemic power running faster and faster in his body. He wondered if he should unleash another burst of power. He could still withstand another stomp, but seeing that the other side was retreating quickly, another stomp would not have much effect. It would be a waste of energy. So he stopped and waited for the other side's next reaction. If the other side wanted to charge again, he could stomp again. Behind Xiao Xian, the Yinjiao warriors who had retreated were prepared for this. Some had followed Zheng Luo to the salt mines before. Others had never seen anything like this before. Their jaws were still open and they ate a mouthful of dust. They were prepared to die. Why did it feel like the elder alone was enough to take on all of them? The commotion was even greater than if all of them had gone into battle. The ground was cracked piece by piece. Some were even flipped upside down. Half of the worm's body was still moving. This. Cheng Cheng said this several times but couldn't say anything. Duo Kong and the others were the same. Although they had felt the power of a king beast at the salt flats, they were just like the horses that had been knocked over. They had fainted after being sent flying. It wasn't as shocking as seeing it with their own eyes. If they had been doubting whether Xiao Xian could take them back to the old haunt, now they were all confident. The royal city team finally managed to escape the fate of being smashed. After everything had stopped, they regrouped. The people who had been sitting in the largest carriage were now standing on the ground. They looked very disheveled. Their exquisite clothes were covered in dust and grass. Green grass juice and wet mud were splattered on their clothes. It was difficult to get rid of them. Whether it was the people who didn't take Yanjiao seriously or the people who were wary of Yanjiao, they were now filled with caution and deep fear. They had always thought that the rumors of the demonized Yanjiao were exaggerated. Now they knew that they had underestimated them. If they had been any closer to the charging cavalry, it wouldn't have been as easy as it was now. A gust of wind blew past, blowing away the dust on the ground. The ground was cracked and filled with large and small stones. It looked like it had been cut into pieces and sifted. People and horses were trapped in it, struggling. Some had already lost consciousness. On one end of the messy area, there was a person standing alone. On the other end, there was a huge team gathered there. The two sides looked at each other. At this moment, there was an eerie silence. Chapter 489. What should we do? Attack again? Why don't we wait for a while and see what happens? Standing on the cracked ground, the royal city team looked at the person standing on the other side. Although the flame giant had disappeared, Xiao Xian was still surrounded by flames. No one could be sure if the scene would repeat itself. The team looked at Xiao Xian in shock. What happened just now was too strange and shocking. It was just an instant change, but it turned everything around. The flame giant gave off an indescribable sense of danger. Even those who were far away could feel the extremely dangerous and oppressive aura. What was that? Asked the girl in leather armor standing beside Yi Zong. I don't know. Although Yi Zong tried his best to remain calm, his heart was in turmoil. In that moment he felt an extremely strong impact. It wasn't a physical one. They were a little further away, so they weren't seriously injured. However, they almost had a mental breakdown. They couldn't even concentrate, let alone perform a divination. There was no movement here for the time being. When Xiao Xian realized that the enemy wasn't going to attack again, he turned around and headed towards where Zheng Cheng and the others were. Yinjiao's migration team had already gone far into the semi-desert. They had to catch up with the team. Let's go first. Xiao Xian called the people who were standing there in a daze and ran in the direction of the tribe's migration. Hey Xiao Xian, what was that? Was that the power of your ancestors? Can you do it again? Zheng Cheng looked at Xiao Xian expectantly. If this power could be used continuously, they wouldn't have to worry about the people from Royal City at all. Looking at their eager eyes, Xiao Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. No. The power that exploded just now was more successful than Xiao Xian had imagined. However, because of this unprecedented power, Xiao Xian had to bear more pressure. Although he could still run and jump, the pain in his muscles was very clear. He could do it again, but only once. If he really did it a third time with the same power, he wouldn't even be able to run. Will the people from Royal City continue to chase us? Duo Kong asked. Yes, but they won't move immediately. Let's take advantage of this time to hurry. Otherwise, the situation will be even worse. I'm guessing that there are reinforcements from Royal City, Xiao Xian said. Reinforcements? It wasn't just Zheng Cheng and Duo Kong. The others didn't understand either. Just for the Yanjiao tribe, why would the people from Royal City spend so much effort to kill them? They wouldn't believe that it was just for the salt and fire crystals. Because until now, the people from Royal City hadn't even mentioned the salt and fire crystals. They attacked as soon as they saw them, and it was so murderous that it seemed like they didn't want to give them any chance of survival. Anyway, let's hurry, Xiao Xian said. They, who were at the back, kept a distance from the rest of the tribe to prevent the people from Royal City from chasing after them. After entering the semi-desert, there were fewer people and fewer threats. They only needed to guard against the people from Royal City. The small tribes in the desert could be taken care of by the people in front of them. Seeing the people from Yanjiao leave, the people from Royal City didn't give the order to chase after them. Instead, they rested where they were. How long until the people from Chaoqiu City and Feng City arrive? Yizong asked the people next to him. Soon, at most 2 days. If they're fast, they'll be here before tomorrow night. A young man with the word Chao embroidered on his clothes said. The Yanjiao people are really strong. They're a big threat, especially that Xiao Xian. It's better to kill people like him. Indeed. If we let them go, I'm worried that they'll become the second thorn in our side. Yizong muttered as he looked in the direction the Yanjiao people had left. The young man from the Chao family had good hearing. His ears twitched, and he caught the key words in Yizong's words. Second thorn. Chaoqiu City was the furthest away from Royal City. He hadn't expected to be found this time, so he had followed the main group here. The others had followed behind, hoping to get a share of the loot. To him, salt and fire crystals were very attractive. He had always thought that the others had the same idea as him, but now it seemed that things weren't that simple. The Chao family of Chaoqiu had been one of the 6 major tribes back in the day. They didn't care much about other things. Other than those who stayed in Royal City, the rest of them stayed in Chaoqiu City, guarding their own land. From time to time, they would exploit the small tribes nearby to fill their warehouses. They had heard a little about the Yanjiao tribe. So they're still the first thorn? Who's the first thorn? The young man from the Chao family asked. The others, including the girl in leather armor from the Ji family, walked over. They had never heard of this before. Who was the first thorn? Yizong kept his mouth shut. There were some things he couldn't let others know. If he hadn't become a core member of the Yi family due to his talent and strength, he wouldn't have known these secrets. The girl in leather armor looked around, then pulled Yizong to the side. Hey Ji Lu, where are you taking Yizong? Someone shouted from behind. Ji Lu, who was wearing leather armor, ignored the people behind her. She was a descendant of the royal Ji family. Her grandfather was the current king and her father was the eldest son of the king. He was likely to inherit the throne in the future. Hence, her status was relatively high and she had the right to know many things. Tell me, it's just the 2 of us. What do you mean by the first thorn and the second thorn? The girl in leather armor asked. Yizong thought for a moment. Do you know what happened in Royal City 1,000 years ago? 1,000 years ago? Ji Lu didn't expect Yizong to bring up something so long ago. However, because they were going against the Yanjiao, she had heard much about it. She had looked through her ancestors' records and knew that the Yanjiao people had indeed appeared 1,000 years ago. I only know that 1,000 years ago, the Yanjiao tribe came from the other side of the sea. Some people left here too, Ji Lu said. In that case, do you know who those people that left were? I don't know. I asked my father, but he wouldn't tell me. Yizong looked in the direction the Yanjiao tribe had left. Most of the people who left were expelled from Royal City. 2 of them were very important. One was Mu Han from the Mu family, the other was Yixiang from the Yi family. Mu Han? Yixiang? Ji Lu didn't recognize these 2 names. Yizong continued, if Mu Han had won the competition, the Mu family wouldn't be what it is now. I heard that Mu Han lost the competition and was expelled from Royal City. What about Yixiang? Yixiang. In the Yi family's records, he was called inauspicious. Ever since he was born, the Yi family's ancestors had seen him as an inauspicious person who would bring disaster to the Yi family. Unfortunately, Yixiang was always able to avoid disaster and survive. On the other hand, those who were in conflict with him were met with disaster. When the royal city fell into civil war, the Yi family wanted to execute Yixiang in secret. Unfortunately, he suddenly disappeared. When Yizong had first heard about Yixiang, he had lamented that such a genius would be considered inauspicious. Back then, Yixiang had mastered many ancient divination techniques. One of them was the now extinct technique of knot divination. Since then, no one had truly mastered it. It was a pity that such a genius was gone. When the royal city fell into civil war, many were executed and many escaped. I heard that they all left with Mu Han. Yixiang might have left with them too. When the royal city finally calmed down and realized what had happened, the passage in the sea had already sunk. Coincidentally, the Yinjiao appeared. The royal city had targeted them before, but due to the civil war, the royal city was unstable internally. They didn't immediately attack the Yinjiao, but they spread rumors to encourage others to target the Yinjiao. Later, the Yinjiao retreated into the mountains and disappeared from sight. Gradually, they were forgotten. I see. Jilu sighed. She was wondering why the 6 noble families had targeted the Yinjiao tribes because of the Fox incident and the Royal City Gate incident. These were just 2 of the reasons. Then why didn't they do it earlier? Asked Jilu. First, they often hide in the mountains and rarely appear in the royal city. Second, the people of the royal city don't want to act rashly. If it had been 1,000 years ago, the nobles of the royal city would have acted long ago. But after thousands of years, the people of the 6 noble families had changed. No one wanted to cause trouble. They only wanted to secure their positions and reap their benefits. If it weren't for the Yi family and the Mu family's constant warnings, they would have forgotten about the threat that had slipped away. Every few decades, when Yinjiao tribes entered the royal city, the conflicts were mostly between the Yi family and the Mu family. Jilu thought about the behavior of the people of the royal city. Indeed, it didn't seem right. But then again, it's been so many years. Mu Han and the Yi family's misfortune should have been buried long ago, right? Unless they become like the Beast King. That's what the Yi family is worried about. Mu Han may have died a long time ago, but who knows if he has any descendants. After all, Mu Han left with a vengeance. He said he would come back for revenge. If he couldn't do it himself, he would let his descendants do it. As for Yixiang, he may still be alive. Perhaps he's using some secret method to survive. Everyone in the royal city knew about the Yi family's prophecy. The world will be divided after a long time, but the world will be united after a long time. But that was only half the truth. Other than the Yi family, no one else knew about the other half. The other half was a reminder to the Yi family that the misfortune was still around. Rather than the royal city attacking the Yinjiao tribe, it was more accurate to say that the Yi family and the Mu family were attacking them. The Yi family was the main driving force behind this. It was a rare opportunity. They had used the incident with the Fox tribe and the City Gate incident to persuade others to agree to send out troops. Even the method of spreading rumors and using others to do the dirty work was similar to 1,000 years ago. The other young masters of the royal city had come with the intention of fooling around. But Yizong had come with a mission. To find out if the Yinjiao people really had the ability to see the future. What was this ability? Did it have anything to do with Yixiang? If it did, the Yi family would do whatever it took to wipe out Yinjiao. Mu Han and Yixiang had been a thorn in the side of the royal city's 6 aristocrats. Were the Yinjiao going to become a second thorn in their side? If they didn't remove this thorn, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But why are the Yinjiao people heading that way? That's not a good place to live. Jilu pulled out a simple map. If we keep going that way, we'll reach the edge soon. If we join forces with the people behind us, we can force them to jump into the sea. Xiaoxian is powerful, but I don't think he can maintain his power forever. When he heard the words jump into the sea, Yizong's eyelids twitched. He had a bad feeling about this. Chapter 490. On the royal city team's side, the beast carriages were damaged by the rocks. Before Chaoqiu City and Feng City's people arrived, they would fix the carriages and continue their journey. I don't believe we can't beat them with our manpower. Even though they had seen Xiaoxian's kick, Yizong and Ji Lu had both said that the Yinjiao people couldn't maintain their momentum forever. They would eventually find a chance to attack. Moreover, in front of them was a semi-desert and beyond that was the sea. They had more people on their side, and the Yinjiao people were destined to be cornered. Thinking of this, the team that had just experienced a setback was reinvigorated. As for the Yinjiao team that had entered the semi-desert, they didn't use water directly from their canteens. Instead, they took water from the tall cactus pillars. After a cold winter, although some of the cactus pillars had frozen to death, most of them had survived. During the melting snow, they had absorbed plenty of water, and each one looked sturdy and strong. Yinjiao people rarely ventured into dry areas like this. They had always lived in the mountains and didn't lack water, but they would have to endure more in the future. They had to get used to the desert. Xiaoxian and the rest followed behind, sending a few warriors to catch up with the team in front to explain the situation. Therefore, the Yinjiao team at the front wasn't too worried. There were depressions in the ground where water had accumulated. The soil was still moist, and there were weeds growing. There were tribesmen living nearby, and when they saw the Yinjiao team they kept their distance. Their eyes were alert and curious. They had never seen such a situation before. They couldn't understand why such a large tribe would migrate here. Did they want to settle down here? There were already few resources, and with more people, wouldn't the competition be even greater? As the days passed, Xiaoxian saw the bird in the sky again. He knew that it was checking the position of the Yinjiao team. Behind them, the royal city team was still chasing after them. They would not give up so easily. At most, they would be more cautious in their pursuit this time. Xiaoxian also saw the people of the Maka tribe, but he was not familiar with those people. He did not see Wanfu and those people were very alert, so Xiaoxian did not go over to say hello. The tribe's route would deviate from the tribe's habitat in this semi-desert area to prevent unnecessary conflicts. The temperature was rising quickly, and this place was dry, so when Xiaoxian saw the familiar fog, he told the tribesmen to quickly collect dew. It was rare for them to encounter such good luck. Otherwise they would have to endure the thirst later. As he walked through the fog, Xiaoxian smelled the scent of seawater and heard the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The sea is in front. Xiangchun had been here several times and was familiar with this place. Since they had reached the end, what to do next could only depend on the shaman. The shaman said that the ancestors came from here, but now they wanted to go back. What kind of method could they use? Swim. Or make a few big ships. There were not enough trees around to make a ship. There was no change under the sea. Unlike when Xiaoxian came, there was no passage for them to go through. A group of people gathered on the coast. People who had never seen the sea looked at it with curiosity and bewilderment. It turned out that the sea looked like this. It turned out that the sea was so big, much bigger than they imagined. However, how could they cross such a sea that they could not see the other side? It was also the shaman's first time here. Looking at the endless sea, the shaman just let everyone rest for a while, and then went to find Xiaoxian. Now Xiaoxian and the others who were at the back had followed the team. When they saw the shaman coming, he said, "I'll go down first." Xiaoxian took off his animal skin bag and walked into the sea, swimming towards the depths. Below the surface of the water, there was a steep slope. The stone path was not far below. As he continued diving, Xiaoxian saw the stone path. All kinds of seaweed grew on the stone path. Many small fish swam around it, catching the small creatures on the seaweed. Seeing this, Xiaoxian knew that this stone path hadn't had a hollow for a long time. Feeling the familiar pulling force, Xiaoxian held his breath, sank to the stone path, and stood on it. When the fish saw Xiaoxian, they scattered in panic. There was too much seaweed under his feet and Xiaoxian felt it was slippery. However, this was not the time to observe this. The surroundings were dark and the light from above was not bright. But soon Xiaoxian saw a flash of light. It was a fiery red light, and the source of the light was himself. On the 4 bone ornaments, each bead emitted a fiery red light. The light spots flickered, and then a small flame sprang out. It was not extinguished by the seawater. It swayed as if it was on land and was not affected by the surrounding seawater. Then the fire suddenly spread like a switch. At first it was only around Xiaoxian, but soon the flames in the water spread along the stone path under Xiaoxian's feet. Xiaoxian held the fire crystal in his hand. When he needed to borrow a large amount of power from his ancestors, he always prepared 1 or 2 fire crystals. Previously, when he faced the royal city team, he used 1 fire crystal. Now, although he did not know what his ancestors had instructed him to do in his dream, he only brought the fire crystal as a backup. Unexpectedly, the flames emitted by the 4 bone ornaments were not under Xiaoxian's control at all. It was as if they were conscious and spontaneous. Under the dark sea along the stone path full of seaweed, a fire dragon covered it. For a moment the stone path looked like it was on fire. The surrounding fish avoided it and swam around curiously. When the flames on the stone path spread for a while, they suddenly rushed upward. On the shore, the Yinjiao people who were waiting anxiously saw the flames rushing up from the bottom of the sea. There was fire in the water? How could it be? But now everything they saw was real. The flames really did come from the bottom of the sea, and the changes continued. After the flames rushed out of the sea, it was like a sharp knife cutting through the sea. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the flames in the sea pushed the waves forward. It was so dazzling. The sea breeze suddenly became violent and blew toward the shore. There seemed to be some flickering flames in the air. White waves rolled on the blue surface of the sea. They were parted by the surging flames, revealing the stone path below. On the stone path full of seaweed, there were some marine animals hiding in the seaweed. They wriggled their bodies and fled to the sides of the stone path, sliding into the walls of the sea on both sides. Xiaoxian stood on the stone path full of seaweed, looking at the broken surface of the sea in a daze. He knew the ancestors' hint in the dream was to go this way, but he didn't think it would be in such a forceful way. There was no hole in the stone path, no passage. Then he would make one. If there was no way to go, then he would make it a passageway. The Yinjiao people on the shore looked at the changes in the sea in shock. Looking at the long narrow passageway in the sea, they were even more shocked than when they saw the flame giant. The shamaness knelt down in front of the hole in the sea. They were grateful for everything the ancestor had done for them. They were grateful that the ancestor had given them a chance to go back. Then Chief Zhengluo, hunting team leader Duokong, and the others all knelt down. The bird in the sky cried out in alarm and turned around to fly back. "There's no time, let's go." Zhengluo turned and shouted, "Everyone follow me." Zhengluo and the shamaness walked at the front of the group, heading into the sea. More than 4,000 people lined up in a long line, following the shamaness and the chief into the sea. If someone didn't know what was going on, they would probably think it was a mass suicide. When everyone stepped onto the stone path full of seaweed, as the last 2 people stepped in, the flames behind them retracted, and the split seawater gathered back together. Walking on such a long stone path with no end in sight, the sea walls on both sides grew taller and taller. Everyone was nervous. Through the flames, they looked inside the sea walls and saw schools of fish swimming in the sea. When they got close, they suddenly turned around and left. Giant fish swam from the bottom of the stone path, from the depths of the sea. Walking on the stone path, they could see its blurry silhouette. At the closest point, they could even see the faint stripes on its body. Young children looked at the walls of the sea that were coated with a layer of fire. They nervously grabbed the corner of their father's clothes, almost falling because of the slippery seaweed under their feet. Xiaoxian suppressed his shock and continued forward. Behind him, the long line of people followed, gradually leaving the shore. Near the shore, the sea had returned to its original state, without any trace of the split water. Rumble Royal City, Chaoqiu City and Feng City's groups were all heading this way. The closer they got to the shore, the more confused they became. Where were the Yinjiao people? Weren't they all heading this way? Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that they could turn into fish? Where did they go? What's wrong with the people in front? Why aren't they continuing? In the carriage, Jilu pulled the curtain aside and shouted, "Young master, in front, in front." The person reporting from the front stuttered, unable to speak clearly. Jilu waved his hand angrily and jumped off the carriage to take a look. Yizong's eyelids twitched, the ominous feeling growing stronger. He also jumped off the carriage and strode forward. Standing on higher ground, they looked at the sea. Not far from the shore, there was a long opening. They could even see people walking through the opening. And that crack was still moving into the distance. The person standing on a giant beast almost fell off the beast when he saw the scene in the sea. What is that? Someone tell me what that is. Jilu pointed at the sea and roared. Walking in the sea? How is that possible? How is that possible? Yizong closed his eyes, his hands still trembling. He regretted it now. He should have ordered his men to chase after them and kill them before they entered the sea at all costs. But it was too late to regret now. It was already too late. 1,000 years ago, Muhan and the others had caused internal strife in Royal City and left with their people. The Yinjiao people had come from the other side of the sea. Now the Yinjiao people were returning from here. Would the people who had left come from there? Xiaoxian turned back to look at the shore. From where he was, he could see the people standing on the backs of the beasts. After leaving, Xiaoxian had a feeling that this was not an eternal farewell. He would come back again. As Xiaoxian led the Yinjiao team along the stone path, on the other side of the sea, in the fearsome beast mountain forest, the shamaness stood by the fire pit, looking at the flames that had suddenly risen. She gave an order. Half a day later, a 1,000-man team led by 7 fearsome beasts emerged from the forest. Chapter 491. Among the 7 ferocious beasts, several of them had never shown their faces in public, except when the tribe was migrating. This was the first time they came out of the ferocious beasts forest, so they were very excited. The ferocious beasts living in the ferocious beasts forest, even if they lived with human beings, were still ferocious. When they looked at people or things, they even made people feel a flash of cold light. Most of the 1,000 people who came out of the ferocious beasts forest were intermediate and senior totem warriors, which puzzled people who saw them. The Wanshi tribe, which was closest to the Yanjiao tribe, had been paying close attention to the situation of the Yanjiao tribe. When they saw the ferocious beasts in the team, they were shocked. No wonder none of the Wanshi beasts they sent came back. They might not have been killed by the Yanjiao people, but they might have been eaten by the Yanjiao ferocious beasts. The people who were monitoring near the ferocious beasts forest often heard the strange cries of the ferocious beasts. They used to take pleasure in other people's misfortune, thinking that the Yanjiao people must have encountered the ferocious beasts in the forest. Now when they saw these beasts, they knew that it was not them who encountered trouble, but the ferocious beasts raised by their tribe. Do you think there are any other ferocious beasts in the Yanjiao tribe besides these beasts? A man of the Wanshi tribe who was monitoring the ferocious beasts forest asked his companion next to him. I don't know. They live in the forest full of ferocious beasts. Who knows if they have other ferocious beasts? No matter whether the Yanjiao people had other ferocious beasts or not, if the chief ordered them to take this opportunity to attack the Yanjiao tribe, he would definitely hide behind the team. It was safer that way. But look at the Yanjiao people who went out in a hurry. What on earth happened to make them so anxious? Another man of the Wanshi tribe said. He just accidentally exposed his position. If it was in the past, the Yanjiao people would definitely chase after him. But this time he just ran 2 steps and found that the Yanjiao people didn't mean to stop at all. They didn't even look at him. It's really strange. I thought the Yanjiao people were going to fight with us. I was so scared. Don't think too much. Let's go back and report to the leader first. Not only were the people of the Wanshi tribe full of doubts, but the Yanjiao team was hard to ignore. Moreover, after leaving the forest, this team seemed to be going straight to their target. Except for a short rest and exchanging food with other tribes on the way, they did nothing else. The robbers didn't dare to make a move on this team. Some travel teams even went over to talk to them during their break, hoping to get some information. Unfortunately, the people in this team didn't care about them at all. Yanjiao's team was guarded against by all the tribes they passed by, but they simply ignored them. They only had one goal now, and that was the desert. What are the Yanjiao people trying to do? The Meng tribesmen who received the news were bewildered. Because of Xiaoxian's disappearance in the desert 2 years ago, the Yanjiao people had lost contact with the other tribes. Later, when several tribes organized to go to the desert, they didn't call the Yinjiao people. But now, what did the Yinjiao people want? In the past 2 years, the Yinjiao tribe had been very low-key. Other than sending people to the desert from time to time, they didn't do anything else that attracted attention. But now the Yinjiao tribe, which had been low-key for 2 years, was acting so ostentatiously. And the leader was the Yinjiao leader Ao. What were they trying to do? Were they finally going to attack a tribe? Every tribe who received the news was paying attention to Yinjiao's movements. Even if they didn't take the Yinjiao people seriously before, after seeing this team they stopped looking down on them. Until they received news that the Yinjiao team was heading in a certain direction, and that direction led to the desert. Were the Yinjiao people going to war with the slave masters? Some people were worried, some mocked, and some just wanted to watch the show. Ao didn't care about other people's gazes and discussions. He led the team straight to the desert. It had been many days since he left the fearsome beast forest, but he still couldn't calm down. That day, the fire seed in the fire pit suddenly surged without any ceremony or anyone by the fire pit. The shaman stood by the fire pit for a while, then gave the order. The shaman told them 2 things. 1, Xiaoxian was coming back. 2, there might be more than one person coming back. The incomplete fire seed is about to become complete. The shaman's words set off a storm in Ao's heart. Even now, thinking about it made him tremble with excitement. For so many years, generation after generation, how many Yinjiao ancestors had died with hatred? Ao never thought that he would encounter so many things during his time as the leader. Whether it was returning to the old land or the other half of the fire seed, it was enough to make every Yinjiao person ecstatic. In the future, he would be able to meet his ancestors with satisfaction. The other half of the fire seed. Could it be that Xian went missing to find the other half of the fire seed? How many people came back with Xian? Pack up, we're going to the desert today. Ao turned to the others in the team and then looked at Caesar, who was lying on the ground. Can you detect Xian's presence? Caesar shook his head slightly. The distance was too far. Seemed to be in that direction, but he wasn't sure. However, he sensed that there was another strange guy in the desert. Seeing Caesar staring in the direction of the desert, Ao didn't care. He didn't think much about it. He got up and asked Tua, who was more familiar with the surrounding area. Then he led the team to the Rain tribe to get some food and water. Now, Yang Sui was almost in charge of the Rain tribe. Why? Because he could ask for rain. The people of the Rain tribe now worshipped Yang Sui like a treasure. Even the chief status was far lower than his. In the past 2 years, every time the Yinjiao people came to the desert, they would rest in the Rain tribe for 2 days. So Yang Sui also knew that Xiaoxian was missing. When he heard that the Yinjiao people were going to the desert to find Xiaoxian, Yang Sui was very happy. He also lent several rainstones to the Yinjiao people. The desert was too hot and dry. The rainstones could condense water and make the Yinjiao people feel better. Not to mention the warriors in the team, the ferocious beasts didn't seem to live in dry areas. They might not be able to adapt to the desert environment. The high-quality rainstones were very precious. Yang Sui lent several of them. If the Yinjiao people took them away and didn't return them, the people of the Rain tribe would cry to death. If it were other people who did this, the people of the Rain tribe would never agree. However, it was Yang Sui who lent the rainstones. He was the shaman, so he had to continue supporting him. Yang Sui was grateful to Xiaoxian. He knew that the matter of praying for rain had something to do with Xiaoxian. Now he could help the Yinjiao people, which was also a kind of gratitude. Yang Sui originally wanted to lend some camels to the Yinjiao people, but Ao refused. He thought camels were too slow, and there were not many camels here. The woman next to Yang Sui became nervous when she heard that he wanted to borrow camels. Besides, they were in a hurry this time. There were nearly 1,000 people in Ao's team, and only a dozen camels were not enough to share. If they encountered those crazy slaves in the desert, they might not be able to protect all the camels. Not long after staying in the Rain tribe, Ao led the team into the desert. Most of the Yinjiao people had never been to such a place. At first they were not used to it. Fortunately, they were strong and got used to it after a few days. However, several ferocious beasts in the team had thick fur and were not in a good state of mind. I didn't expect the desert to be so hot. Mao wiped the sweat from his forehead. It was Lei and Tua who brought people to the desert several times before. He had never been here. Now, even Sia was about to become a roasted pig, let alone himself. Fortunately, the Rain Tribe shaman gave us these rain stones. Otherwise, the situation would be more difficult. Tua looked around. He could only judge the direction according to the sun. The sand dunes in the desert were always changing. Even if he had been here several times, he could not identify the location according to the appearance of the sand dunes. The best thing is to find a place to rest first and continue when it's dark. Ao thought so too, but before he could say anything, Caesar, who had been quiet all this while, seemed to have noticed something and looked around vigilantly. "What's wrong?" Ao asked. The other ferocious beasts were not abnormal. Anyway, it was always good to be careful. Ao made a gesture behind him. The originally dispirited people quickly adjusted their state and became alert. Along the way, they had encountered some scattered forces harassing them. They had also been attacked by ferocious beasts in the desert. But this was the first time that only Caesar noticed it and the others did not respond. But soon, the other ferocious beasts began to become restless and alert. For a moment, only the low growls of the ferocious beasts could be heard. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of flowing sand was heard. Small black dots appeared in everyone's vision. Moreover, these black dots were increasing rapidly, fighting to emerge from under the sand. Oh no! It's the insect tide. Why is there an insect tide here? Everyone be careful. Ao raised the stone knife in his hand and shouted. As soon as he turned his head, he saw Caesar running to the front. When Ao led the people into the desert, Xiaoxian and the rest were still walking in the sea. Every step Xiaoxian took, the seawater in front of him would be split open. At the same time, the same length of the stone path behind the team would be submerged by the seawater. These days, they had been eating the dried meat and grains that they had prepared beforehand. The main thing was the 1,000-grain gold that they had harvested last year. The 1,000-grain gold was very filling. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. They drank the water stored in the pot, and the water condensed by Xiaoxian's rainstone. Sometimes they would catch some creatures that lived in the seaweed. They would catch them before they escaped and eat what they could. Even though the water and food they brought could barely support such a large team, everyone became very weak after a long time. Some of the children's faces were now sunken. Hold on, we're almost there. Chapter 492. The further they walked, the clearer Xiaoxian could feel the bone ornament's power weakening. In the beginning, the water kept a distance from them. As the water grew closer, they had no choice but to cut in and squeeze. It was their first time leaving the place they'd lived in for so long. It was their first time walking on such a strange stone path. After the initial novelty, all that was left was anxiety. They were afraid of the tall walls on both sides. They were worried that the bone ornaments would run out of power. They were worried that the water would crash down and drown them. It was only here that they realized how small they were. Of course, there was also uncertainty about the future. There were many people in the group. They did the same thing every day. They were used to it. But what about the future? They didn't know what it would be like. But as long as the tribe existed, everyone would be together. Even if they had to die together, they were willing. Xiaoxian looked up ahead. Although all he saw was water, he could feel a familiar presence. The first slave, the blue beetle, was there. Other than that, there was another. The smile in Xiaoxian's eyes grew deeper. Soon. Don't worry, someone's here to get us, said Xiaoxian. He sensed Caesar's presence. Compared to Sapphire's beetle, Caesar's connection with Xiaoxian was weaker. If he wasn't close enough, he wouldn't have sensed him. In other words, Caesar was waiting at the other end of the stone path. Since Caesar was here, there must be other Yinjiao people. The shamaness and Caesar wouldn't let Caesar come alone. Xiaoxian told the shamaness, Zhang Luo and the rest about what he sensed. Everyone perked up at the news. What were they worried about? They wouldn't accept it. They'd learned a lot of Yinjiao's secrets along the way. They knew that there was another Yinjiao tribe on the other side of the sea. The two tribes used to be one, but something happened 1,000 years ago and they separated. Now they were going to merge into a whole Yinjiao. As they got closer and closer to the target point, the sea walls on both sides also had obvious changes. The sea walls were gradually lowering, and the entire stone path was actually concave in an arc. Therefore, the closer they were to the sea, the lower the sea walls on both sides would naturally be. As the walls lowered, Yangguang made the path much brighter. The bone ornament's power was still weakening. On the stone path, the first half of the path was the bone ornament's own power. When it could no longer support itself, if there was no power to take over, the space it created would become smaller and smaller. The water on both sides would come closer and closer, and eventually someone in the group would be drowned. Xiaoxian knew that the ancestors could only help them so far. They had to rely on themselves. Since he'd brought so many people into the sea, Xiaoxian had to bring them out too. He took out a fire crystal. Just like how he pushed snow in the snow, he imitated the ornament's actions to push down the parts it couldn't support. It took a lot of energy to hold on. Xiaoxian couldn't do it on his own. He had to rely on the fire crystals. This was why he always carried them with him. So when the last person in the group was prepared to be submerged, he realized that the water that touched his heels had moved away from him, maintaining a distance of half a step. Knowing what Xiaoxian was doing, the shamaness took out a bag of fire crystals and gave it to him. She was still being carried, or she wouldn't be able to keep up with the group's speed. She couldn't move freely, so she had to rely on Zheng Luo to pass the crystals. When Xiaoxian used up a fire crystal, Zheng Luo handed him another. At the other end of the stone path above the cliff, Yinjiao's team had already arrived. They were shocked when they encountered the insect swarm. They didn't expect that the giant insect would bring Caesar here. Of course, the team followed them here. This is where Xian fell? Gigu asked. There were two team leaders in the tribe, Gigu and Ta. One of them had to stay behind to guard the tribe. In the end, because Gigu had a bird that could scout in the sky, he could come out with the team. Ta stayed behind to guard the tribe. Cha-Cha had disappeared for a long time. No one could find it. Now, the only one in the tribe that could scout was Gigu's snow-white falcon. It should be here. Ao thought of how Xiaoxian had been forced to jump down from here. He was furious. But now there was no Snowfield City, no Fire Hill City, only Rock Hill City. The Jinjiawi of Snowfield City were all slaughtered. Then we'll wait here? Gigu asked. Ao looked at Caesar, who was squatting next to the cliff, and said, "Let's wait here." Caesar looked in the direction of the sea. Would Xiaoxian come out of the sea? Ao and others were puzzled. They could only wait here. If there was a chance, they would climb down the cliff and spear a few fish. If there were giant fish, they would not dare to go into the water. They dared to provoke the giant beasts in the forest, but they did not dare to provoke the ones in the water. Their swimming skills were not as good as the fish. Day by day, they did not see a person jump out of the sea. Until one day, Caesar suddenly howled towards the sea. The people who were skinning the fish immediately dropped the things in their hands and came to the edge of the cliff to look into the distance. Look, what is that? Is it a fire? Nonsense, how can there be fire in the sea? Hey, it seems to be true. All the people in the team came to the edge of the cliff and stood in a long row along the edge of the cliff. Why is there a fire in the sea? Is it made by Xian? Gigu wondered. On the blue sea, the fire was too conspicuous. It was obviously not the light reflected by the sun. It was moving. Caesar next to him howled again, his 4 feet impatiently stepping on the ground. He wanted to go over, but unfortunately he could not fly, so he could only stand here and worry. Is there someone down there? As the fire on the sea got closer and closer, they saw something moving under the narrow gap with the fire. Not only that, everyone in the Flaming Horn tribe felt a stronger and stronger feeling. They could feel the totemic flame in their minds. When they were not in battle, the totemic flame was unusually active, as if it was waiting for something good to happen. They could clearly feel this feeling, as if a missing part of their body was about to be filled with excitement and anticipation. Thinking of the shaman's words when they set off, and connecting it with the feeling now, Ao's heart beat faster and faster. His clenched hands were full of sweat, and he stretched his neck to look at the sea. Ao, Gigu and the others were staring at the fire on the sea. They were so engrossed in it that they did not notice that something was approaching them from behind. A few soldiers were bumped into and impatiently turned back with their elbows. "Why are you bumping into me? I'm looking. Don't knock me down," the soldier said as he felt something was wrong. It seemed that something was blocking the light. He turned his head and saw a big lump. Facing such a big beetle, the muscles on the soldier's face twitched, and he moved to the side. The other soldiers in front of him hurriedly made way for it. Although they were not afraid of such a giant beast, they had hunted many ferocious beasts that were bigger than this insect in the forest. However, this was different. This was the leader of the insect army. If they accidentally angered it, they did not know if it would let its insect army sweep over. It was not a good thing to encounter an insect army in the desert. The big blue beetle stood on the edge of the cliff and looked ahead. Then with a puff it opened its wings. The people standing in a row along the cliff glanced at the big blue beetle. They saw it flapping its wings and flying towards the fire on the sea. The Yinjiao people were speechless. Damn it, this thing can fly. Gigu thought for a while and let his white falcon fly over to take a look. Xiao Xian was holding on, trying his best to control the opening of the stone path. Even with the fire crystals, he still needed to expend a lot of energy. Now he was almost exhausted, and his muscles were aching. However, the shore was right in front of him. He could even smell the subtle sand and dust in the air. Sensing something, Xiao Xian did not have time to wipe his sweat. He looked up at the sky. The people in the team also heard the flapping of wings and looked up. Seeing the familiar big blue lump rolling over, Xiao Xian smiled. Long time no see, Sapphire. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Zheng Luo motioned for the people behind to stay put. The people in the team saw the big blue bug fly down. Following right above Xiao Xian's head, there was a bird call in the sky. It was not Cha-Cha's voice but Gigu's white falcon. Since it was here, then Gigu and the others must be here too. Xiao Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He threw away the white powder in his hand and gestured for Zheng Luo to pass him another one. We're here. There's only a short stretch left. Everyone hold on. Our brothers will come to support us. Saying this, Xiao Xian asked the people in the team to let Sapphire bring the elderly and children who could not hold on any longer to shore. Zheng Luo picked 3 people first, 1 elderly and 2 children. They were not in good condition. They were sick and had been carried on someone's back. They were unconscious now. Receiving Xiao Xian's orders, Sapphire grabbed the 3 people. Its first reaction was to wrap them up into a ball and bring them away. But then it thought these were living people. It was its first time carrying living people. Seeing Sapphire take them away, the people in the team relaxed. They also felt a sense of familiarity that could not be ignored. It was like a blood connection. On the cliff, Ao had already seen the people. He ordered the people who brought Sapphire back to take care of them. Where's the rope? Prepare the straw rope. Ao shouted. Chief, we don't have enough rope. We used it when we were catching fish. Ao thought for a moment and looked around. His gaze fell on the animal skin clothes tied around his waist. It was too hot during the day, so most of them were topless. When the night turned cold, they would wear the clothes. Now he took off the clothes. No rope. Then use this. If 1 piece of clothing was not enough, would 1,000 pieces not be enough? Their animal skins were all made from fearsome beast skin. They were tough and would not break easily. Ao rubbed his red eyes as he put on the animal skin coat. Why did he suddenly want to cry? The flames in the sea were getting closer and closer to shore. The people on the stone path could already see the people standing on the cliff. Hello, my long-lost brother. Chapter 493. It had to be said that the way Xiao Xian brought this group of people back far exceeded Ao's expectations. But at this point they no longer cared how these people came back. They only knew that these people were one with their tribe. The feeling of the totemic flame confirmed this. When Xiao Xian supported the crack to the edge of the cliff, Ao jumped into the sea with his people. They didn't even think about whether there were giant aquatic beasts in the water. The flame that could split the surface of the sea did not stop the Yanjiao people. Those who jumped into the sea could directly enter the crack and stand on the stone path. But at this point, Xiao Xian was almost at his limit. I can't hold on for much longer. You guys take those who can't move up first. Xiao Xian turned to Zheng Luo. Take the people in the team and follow them. They're all on the same side. Zheng Luo smiled and nodded. I know. We're all Yinjiao. He walked towards Ao, who was the first to come in. Yinjiao Zheng Luo. Yinjiao Ao. The two branch chiefs extended their arms and hugged each other warmly, then thumped each other's shoulders. This was a way of showing friendliness in the tribe. Ao glanced at the team behind Xiaoxian. Suppressing his excitement, he said, "We'll take those who are injured, sick or weak up first. Those who still have energy can climb up using the ropes we threw down. There will be people up there to receive them." Knowing that they were on the same side, the team on the stone path did not reject them or raise their guard. They handed over the injured and quickly climbed up using the ropes made of animal skin. Even those who were exhausted and on the verge of fainting from hunger and thirst tried their best to stay awake. They had reached their destination and there would be people to receive them. They didn't have to worry about anything. They just had to climb up. Xiaoxian had to stay behind. After all, he had to support the crack. Only after the others left could he withdraw the power to part the water and leave. After walking in the sea for so long, not to mention the others, even Xiaoxian felt thirsty and hungry. His mouth was dry and cracked. "Drink some water first." Ao took out his water bottle. There was still some water left in it and he gave it all to Xiaoxian. After drinking some water, Xiaoxian finally felt a little better. But the feeling of hunger was even more obvious. He was planning to have a good meal when he got back. Looking up at the cliff, there were people climbing up with people on their backs. There were also experienced rock climbers with one person on their back and one in their hand. There were also people who climbed up with only one hand and two legs. The 10 colorful ropes were put down. At first, the people at the top let the people below climb up. Later, they found that it was too slow, so they connected 2 of the ropes end to end and formed a circle. Then they lowered the ropes. There were people at the top of the cliff pulling. Every time one side was pulled up, the other side would lower the same length. It was like a conveyor belt for transporting goods. One side would send the goods up and then unload them at the top. The empty conveyor belt would be lowered from the other side, waiting for the next batch of goods to be delivered. Therefore, the people below could be pulled up as long as they grabbed onto the ropes. Those who couldn't even grab onto the ropes were tied to the top and pulled up. It was indeed a good idea. The animal skin clothes and pants were also wear-resistant. They wouldn't break after being rubbed against the rock. At least they could support the people pulling up. Seeing that this method was quite efficient and could save the people below, the other ropes were tied up and pulled up in the same way. On the stone path, as the number of people decreased, the cracks also shrank. The smaller the cracks, the more energy Xiaoxian could save. After the other people in the team left with the ropes, Xiaoxian withdrew the power that was supporting the bone ornaments and grabbed onto the ropes. There was no more power to separate the water. The walls on both sides of the cliff collapsed and gathered together. The water splashed all over Xiaoxian. Fortunately, the rope was pulled up quickly. Xiaoxian wasn't drowned by the water. As Xiaoxian was pulled up, he saw a row of people standing along the edge of the cliff. There were also a few familiar beast heads. It felt like a day had passed, as if he hadn't left for the past 2 years. "I'm back." Seeing Xiaoxian, everyone was very excited. Many people wanted to give Xiaoxian a warm hug. Unfortunately, as soon as Xiaoxian came up, the others were pushed aside by Caesar. When Xiaoxian left the fearsome beast forest and came to the desert, he didn't bring Caesar with him. This guy was actually quite resentful. However, seeing Xiaoxian, he was very excited. He lowered his big wolf head and kept rubbing against Xiaoxian. "Long time no see, old friend." Caesar had been with Xiaoxian the longest. Xiaoxian had watched him grow from an ordinary wolf cub to what he was today. It was indeed not easy. Thinking about it, more than 10 years had passed. Xiaoxian greeted everyone one by one, and asked about the condition of the injured members. Hearing that their conditions had stabilized and their lives were not in danger for the time being, Xiaoxian was relieved. "Leader, why are you here?" Xiaoxian asked Ao. "The shaman told us to come here. However, after coming to the desert, we met this." Ao pointed to the big beetle that was excitedly kicking its hind legs, and told them what had happened. When they saw Caesar running towards the insect tide, they were really scared. They thought that Caesar was going to fight with the big beetle. Even without the big beetle, facing such a large army of insects would not be easy. However, what happened next was beyond their expectations. The insect tide actually opened a path for Caesar. Then Caesar followed the big beetle and ran towards them. The team naturally followed behind. Good job. Xiao Xian patted the big blue beetle that was now more than 2 meters tall on its back. Just like the little bug that could be crushed with one finger back then, by chance it became Xiao Xian's first slave. Thinking of what Jiju had said, Xiao Xian could clearly feel the thoughts and emotions of this beetle. The more it grew, the closer this connection became. Sapphire's carapace was now like a metal helmet. It was very hard. However, there were crisscrossing marks on this hard shell. Some were marks caused by sharp weapons, while others were marks caused by blunt weapons. This bug had also encountered many things. Finally, they brought the team here. It was impossible for them to leave immediately. They needed to rest here. After walking for so long, everyone had not had a good rest. They were exhausted. Ao asked the soldiers to give the fish that they had caught to these new brothers. Then they went into the sea again to look for opportunities. These days they had mastered the skills of fishing in the sea. It was not as difficult as before. Probably because they were close to the sea, the air was not as dry as deep in the desert. The rainstones condensed water faster. After receiving water, the people gradually recovered. The soldiers who were still in good spirits started to chat with their new brothers. Because they were not familiar with the languages used on both sides of the sea were different. Although many people had some contact with the tribal language, they were still not used to it. At first they stumbled a little. However, they were able to express the general idea with words and gestures. Both sides had a lively conversation. Especially when Tuo and the others saw the weapons in the hands of their new brothers. Their eyes were wide open. Metal weapons were not common here. They had seen more of them in the desert. Even the other tribes had stolen them from the slave masters. After the core seed was brought back, the stone was placed there. However, they did not know how to smelt it, so it had been put aside. Tuo and the others felt that their worldview had been turned upside down. Duokong, who had heard about the situation here, was not surprised. He even generously gave a small copper knife to Gigu. The two hunting team leaders had their arms around each other's shoulders as they chatted. Tuo Mao and Mo and the others were also chatting with Tao Zheng and Wu Zhan. The former was envious of the latter for being able to afford metal weapons. The latter was envious of the former for having such powerful fearsome beasts. Although the fearsome beasts were listless now, this was only temporary. As soon as they left the desert, they would immediately recover their health. Without fire, the tribesmen used rocks. During the day, the rocks in the desert were very hot. When food was placed on the rocks, you could hear a sizzling sound. Although they could not be fully cooked, it was better than eating them raw. Who knew if the fish in the sea would get sick if they ate them raw? Yang Guang and his sister also brought their tamed fearsome beasts this time. Every time they came, they would personally go into the sea to find food for the two fearsome beasts. When Xiao Xian looked over, he saw Chow Mai's Guang Guang throwing a large conch at the forest rakos. The forest rakos used its beak as a chisel and easily broke the conch. After looking around, Xiao Xian retracted his gaze and asked Ao about the situation here. After 2 years, there should have been a lot of changes. The forces in the desert have indeed changed a lot. Now, there are no longer the 3 major cities, only Rock Hill City. The other smaller cities are all vassals. However, Rock Hill City is currently cleaning up the remaining forces. They haven't made any moves yet. When we came here, we didn't meet anyone from Rock Hill City. Ao said. After all, the desert was huge. Even if Rock Hill City was the overlord of the desert, they wouldn't be scattered to every corner of the desert. Most places were just yellow sand. Unless they were purposely cleaning up a certain force, they wouldn't send troops there. As for why the tribesmen didn't meet anyone from Rock Hill City, it could be because of luck. It could also be because of the beetle. After all, it was the beetle that led the way. Xiao Xian was already prepared for the outcome in the desert. Especially after learning about some of the secrets of the past, he knew that the people surnamed Sure were planning something big. He just didn't know how they were going to take revenge. What about the tribe? Xiao Xian asked again. The tribe is fine. Everything is going well. The harvest from the fields is also good. The wanderers are also well behaved. As for the other tribes, I didn't hear anything big. However, when there was a scuffle in the desert, I heard that a few tribes sent people to the desert a few times. They must have taken a lot of things. What about the others? The others? Like the weather. How was the past winter? Xiao Xian asked. The weather? Speaking of which, it's strange. In the past, there was always snow in the mountains. This year there was no snow, only rain. We asked later and it didn't snow anywhere else. It was rare to have a warm winter. We even went hunting in the mountains a few times. Haha. Ao laughed. However, as he laughed, he noticed that Xiao Xian and Zhengluo's expressions were strange. Chapter 494. What's wrong? Ao asked, puzzled. Xiao Xian told him about the situation on the other side of the sea. That winter was indeed strange. The conditions on both sides of the sea were polar opposites. One side was almost frozen to ice, while the other side was so hot that they didn't even want to wear the thinnest animal skin clothes. After listening to Xiao Xian, Ao fell into deep thought. The situation on the other side of the sea that Xiao Xian described was much worse than their situation on the other side of the river. No one felt at ease when things were out of the ordinary. Although they had thought of many possibilities and were worried, they were not as shocked as they were now. No matter what, it's fine if the weather doesn't change. If it gets hotter this winter, it's better for us to prepare in advance. Hot weather had its inconveniences. Plants had lost their original growth patterns, and the habits of the beasts in the forest had been disrupted. If they wanted to have a good harvest, they had to prepare more. However, there was still half a year's time. It was better to solve the problem at hand first. The team rested for 3 days. They could not stay here forever. Food and water had always been a big problem. If they continued, not only would the situation not improve, it would worsen. A few fearsome beasts helped carry some of the sick and injured. Ao also brought some people to carry them. No matter how weak they were much better than these people who had come all the way here. Even if the current situation was not good, everyone was happy. When people were happy, they would have motivation. Xiao Xian asked Sapphire to control the beetles to follow behind and lie in ambush. They did not surround the area. This would scare away the desert beasts that came out at night. They did not want to encounter them before because they were in trouble. Now that they were short of food, they would kill every beast they encountered. Therefore, when they saw a huge scorpion come out, everyone's eyes turned green as if they could shine. The huge scorpion that had rushed out of the sand with a murderous aura felt an even stronger murderous aura. Even its tail froze and it turned to run. Swish, swish, swish. Dozens of people jumped out of the team, not giving the scorpion a chance to escape. Gigu and the others wanted to show off in front of their brother tribe. They shouted, "We'll do it. Back off, let us do it. You guys should rest first, we should be the ones to entertain you." On the other side, Duokong and the rest, "No need really, we can handle it ourselves." He hadn't hunted for a long time, and his hands were itching. One scorpion was not enough to split the spoils. The other ferocious beasts in the team did not even get a chance to show off their skills. They were like bystanders. When they entered the desert, their limelight was stolen by the beetle, and when they left, they did not even have a chance to steal the limelight. Most of the time, the group would wait for the sun to dim down before they started their journey. Then they would find a place to rest before the sun came out. It was impossible for such a large troop to remain unnoticed. Actually, when the Yinjiao people entered the desert, Rock Hill City's scouts had already wanted to keep an eye on them. However, when they encountered the insect wave, they did not follow them closely. They only sent someone to report to their superiors and guard a few key points to prevent the tribesmen from stealing their things. If the young master had not taken the important things in advance, the tribesmen would have stolen even more. During the chaotic times in the desert, many tribesmen took advantage of the chaos to steal metal weapons. This was the impression that the people in the desert had of the tribesmen. Therefore, when they saw a troop of close to 1,000 people enter the desert, they were all on guard. Although there had been tribesmen in the past, there had never been such a large troop. There were even ferocious beasts among them. Now that they had detected the troops' movements and did not see the insect wave, they could monitor them. Unfortunately, Yinjiao also had a white bird that was difficult to deal with. Therefore, it was difficult to monitor them from the air. They could only keep a distance from Yinjiao's troop and follow them. However, why did Yinjiao's troop suddenly increase by so much? This made them raise their vigilance from the beginning to the highest level. When did such a huge team suddenly appear in the desert? Could it be that they had gathered a few scattered factions? No, they had to report the latest information quickly. The Yinjiao people also knew that there were people watching them nearby, but it was difficult to catch them. They did not have the energy to deal with those people now. They just wanted to leave the desert as soon as possible. As long as those people did not provoke them, they did not want to waste energy fighting. Hey, look over there. A Yinjiao warrior covered his head under the hot sun and looked at a sand dune not far away. On the long sand dune, there were some creatures walking on the sand ridge. When they saw those creatures, most of the people in the troop wanted to rush up with their knives and slaughter those creatures. However, they were stopped by Xiao Xian. If they were stopped by others, they would have other thoughts. After all, it was rare to come across such good food. If they did not slaughter it, how could they live up to their luck? The chief did not even say anything. What were you shouting for? However, the one who stopped them was Xiao Xian. Whether it was on this side of the sea or the other side of the sea, Xiao Xian's position was very special. Although it was said that his position in the tribe was second only to the shaman and the chief, his influence was definitely greater than the other two. Especially after the crossing of the sea incident, no one in the Yinjiao team could directly refute Xiao Xian's words. Whoever did would be beaten up by others. Therefore, when Xiao Xian stopped them, the people who rushed over excitedly with their knives turned around and ran back obediently. There must be a reason why Xiao Xian stopped them. Xiao Xian raised his hand to shield his head from the scorching sun. He looked at the long line of camels on the sand ridge with a big smile on his face. He really did not know how this group of camels had survived in the desert until now and safely gathered in such a large group. Mud. It's still alive. Yes, in the group of camels walking on the sand ridge, the leading camel with a white face, 2 white short ears, and long dark brown hair at the front of its curved neck and hump was the camel that Yang Sui gave to Xiao Xian. The high temperature made the scene a little distorted. Xiao Xian shielded his head from the sun and looked at Mud, who was walking in front of the camels with its head slightly raised. It was facing the wind and sand, leading the camels towards them. Ong ong. Mud called twice, the long hair on its head fluttering in the wind, as if it was greeting Xiao Xian. Hearing Xiao Xian call Mud, Tuanlei also remembered the origin of the camel and explained to the others. When Xiao Xian left Autumnfall, he could not bring Mud with him, so he let it go. It only had a leather bag with water hanging around its neck. Now the bag was empty and the bag was open. The bag was tattered and there were obvious bite marks. If it were not for the bag, Xiao Xian would not have recognized it in the first place. Seeing Mud walk to the side of the giant beetle, Xiao Xian could feel that Sapphire seemed to be familiar with this camel. He guessed that Sapphire must have helped Mud and the camels to be able to wander safely in the desert during the war. After all, many people would not think of anything else when they encountered an insect tied. The best thing to do was to run. Who would have the mind to hunt camels? Let's go together? Xiao Xian patted Mud's neck. Although it looked thin, it was very energetic. It was already a great fortune to be alive. Xiao Xian did not know whether this was an acceptance or rejection. He let a few soldiers sit on the camel's back and they were not rejected. Most of these camels should have been raised by people. Later, they left the slave master's city during the war and came out. Otherwise, wild camels would not have been so easy to get in touch with. Bring the sick and injured over and let these camels carry them. Xiao Xian fed some water to the camels and felt that they were much closer to them. With the camels helping to carry the injured, everyone in the team could relax. Sapphire often circled around Xiao Xian. Even in the face of Caesar's baring teeth, it persisted. Xiao Xian knew what it wanted. After the third unlock, the beetle still had 2 locks on its body. No slave did not want to be unlocked. In the past 2 years, there were many wars in the desert and Sapphire was injured several times. If it were not for the insect tide, it would have been difficult to avoid those disasters. Once the situation in the desert stabilized, would there be people who would specifically target it? After all, the insect tide was a big problem for the slave masters in the desert, especially the Shi family who was now in power. Shi Shu knew that Sapphire was on Xiao Xian's side. He could not let such a threat remain in the desert. Whether it was Sapphire or the insect army, they had long gotten used to the desert's climate and environment. They were used to the desert's sandy ground, so they would not feel comfortable in a new environment. The best way to give Sapphire more protection was to make it stronger. Therefore, when they were getting closer to the edge of the desert, Xiaoxian took Sapphire to a sand dune during their break and tried to unlock the fourth lock. After Xiaoxian left the desert, he did not know when he would return. If he could unlock it successfully, it would increase the beetle's chances of survival. Unlocking the fourth lock consumed a lot of energy. A large amount of totemic power and power of inheritance were lost. Fortunately, Xiaoxian had recovered most of his depleted energy from crossing the sea. In addition, when he trained the bone ornaments, he had more precise control of the two powers. Although it was not easy to unlock the fourth lock on Sapphire's body, it was a success in the end. After unlocking the fourth lock, Sapphire sank into the sand. Xiaoxian could feel that this time it might be asleep for a long time. The fourth lock was obviously more difficult than the third. It was a hurdle. Xiaoxian could only unlock it. As for the future, it would depend on Sapphire. After Sapphire sank into the sand, the other beetles did not appear again. For a long time, the insecti did not appear in the desert. Of course, that was a story for later. On the fourth day after unlocking Sapphire, the team finally walked out of the desert. The team decided to rest around the Rain Tribe and get some food to eat. When Yang Sui received a report from the Rain Tribesmen that a large team was approaching the Rain Tribe, he was very worried. He was worried that the people in the desert would attack the Rain Tribe. But after looking around, he realized that it was not a slave master. There were a few familiar faces in front of the team. Yang Sui relaxed a little and his expression softened. There was a smile in his eyes. When he saw the group of camels next to the team, Yang Sui recognized Mud at the front. The smile in his eyes widened. But soon, the smile in his eyes turned into surprise and then shock. Damn, there were only 1,000 people when they left. How come there were so many now? What happened to this world? Chapter 495. Yang Sui was very happy to see Xiaoxian again. Without Xiaoxian, there would be no shaman of the Rain Tribe. Yang Sui would have been burned to death long ago. Although he didn't know what happened to Xiaoxian in the past 2 years, it was probably the luckiest thing for him to walk out of the desert alive. Yang Sui's childhood sweetheart, Misu, was even happier than Yang Sui. She didn't have any special feelings for the Yinjiao people. She was just happy to see Mud. When she sent Mud away, she was prepared to never see him again. She didn't expect to see him again 2 years later, and a group of them came back. These camels followed them out of the desert and probably had to stay in the Rain Tribe in the future. They didn't seem to want to leave and followed Misu obediently. Now that the sapphire sunk into the sand, they had no protection. Compared to the chaotic and dangerous desert, this place was much safer. Yang Sui didn't understand why the Yinjiao people suddenly quadrupled, but he still asked people to prepare water and food. Thank you. Xiaoxian returned all the rainstones that Yang Sui borrowed. As for the one that Yang Sui gave him, Yang Sui didn't ask for it back. Haha, you're welcome. It's good that you came out alive. I heard that the desert was very chaotic these 2 years. Yang Sui handed the rain stone to the person next to him. Seeing that all the rain stones were returned, the people of the Rain Tribe finally felt relieved. Their attitude towards the Yinjiao people also eased a lot. After all, rain stones were very important to living in such a dry place. There were too many people in the Yinjiao team, so the arranged houses couldn't accommodate all of them. They could only let the sick and weak people live in the houses. The rest of the warriors stayed outside and sat on the ground. There are no sandstorms these days. You can rest here without worries, Yang Sui said. Xiaoxian still believed in Yang Sui's ability to predict the weather. If he said there would be no sandstorms these days, then there definitely wouldn't be. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a shaman anymore. When people were hungry, they could eat dry and hard biscuits. The warriors chewed the dry and hard biscuits and drank water sparingly. They felt alive again. Are those people from Yinjiao? Yang Sui asked Xiaoxian as he looked at the group of people sitting on the ground. At first, he thought that the Yinjiao people had brought a group of slaves from the desert, but now it seemed that was not the case. They got along too well, as if they were one. Moreover, the newcomers had the aura of the fire seed, which belonged to the Yinjiao tribe. As a shaman, Yang Sui was very sensitive to this. Yes, they're all from Yinjiao. Xiao Xian sighed. By the way, it's so chaotic in the desert. You're close to the desert. Are you okay? How can he be completely fine? Yang Sui was angry at the mention of this. Because of the war in the desert, people often escaped from the desert and brought a lot of trouble to the Rain tribe. Some people even wanted to rob them. Several people of the Rain tribe who went out to look for rain stones mysteriously disappeared. A few days later, when they sent people out to look for rain stones, they found a few skeletons in the place where they often looked for rain stones. There was not much flesh, and the marks on the skeletons were cut by sharp weapons instead of being bitten by beasts. Now, as long as slaves come out, our tribe treats them as enemies. It's okay if they stay far away, but if they want to come close, the warriors of the Rain tribe will kill them directly. Speaking of this, Yang Sui sighed. I know it's dangerous to be too close to those slave owners. In fact, I think it would be better if our tribe could move a little farther away to a more fertile place. Some things couldn't be solved by praying for rain. Those people in the desert were too dangerous. Who knew what would happen in the future? As the shaman of the Rain tribe, Yang Sui also had a heavy burden on his shoulders. He really wanted to move the tribe to a better place. However, it was very risky to move the tribe. Otherwise, they would have moved long ago instead of waiting until now. No one wanted to take the risk. What if the fire seed was destroyed during the migration? The fighting power of the Rain tribe was not as strong as that of the Yanjiao. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian became serious and winked at Yang Sui. Talk. Yang Sui knew that Xiao Xian had something to say, so he nodded and took Xiao Xian to the shaman's exclusive room. No one was allowed to enter. Even the chief was not allowed to enter without permission. Looking at the layout of the room and thinking of the situation before Yang Sui became a shaman, he felt that things were different now. Shaman, you're living a good life. Xiao Xian sat down on a stone bench. Not bad. Yang Sui grinned. By the way, what do you want to talk to me about? Is it important? It's really important. Xiao Xian said. I remember when I came here 2 years ago, you said that there was a problem with the fire seed of your tribe. Xiao Xian knew the secret of the fire seed because of Yang Sui. Yes, the shaman of the Rain tribe could pray for rain, but the key factor to the success of praying for rain was not the shaman, but the fire seed. Because the fire seed was in trouble, no matter how hard it prayed, it could not succeed. Yang Sui once told Xiao Xian that the fire seed seemed to be asleep. When the shaman prayed for rain, he could not wake it up no matter how hard he tried. It only woke up once a year during the big sacrifice. At other times it would not wake up. Moreover, this situation had become more and more serious for thousands of years. This was why the people of the Rain tribe were so crazy when Yang Sui succeeded in praying for rain 2 years ago. I found the reason, Xiao Xian said. And I know there is a solution. Yang Sui was shocked and looked at Xiao Xian in surprise. What's the solution? If there was a solution, he had to do it even if it was risky. Xiao Xian told Yang Sui some information he got from the other side of the sea. He did not talk about the specific situation on the other side of the sea. He only said that the fire seed could be integrated into everyone's body, and it did not have to be in the fire pit. However, after the fire seed disappeared, the tribe would also face the risk of disbanding. Many tribes disappeared on the other side of the sea. The wanderers formed various new forces, or lived in the cities under the jurisdiction of the slave owners. The cohesion of the tribe would be greatly weakened, which was the biggest risk. After listening to Xiao Xian, Yang Sui was silent for a while. He had to admit that Xiao Xian's words made him very embarrassed. He knew the reason for the weakening of the fire seed and the solution to prevent it from continuing to weaken, but the risk was also unacceptable. The existence of the tribe was to gather the strength of the tribe and unite around the fire seed. But if this cohesion was gone, would the Rain tribe still exist? What will you choose? Yang Sui looked straight into Xiao Xian's eyes. He wanted to confirm whether Xiao Xian's answer was true. Our choice? In fact, it's very clear. With your ability, you should be able to tell the difference between the people outside and the Yanjiao tribesmen, right? Yang Sui's pupils shrank, and he unconsciously clenched his fists. That is, they are the fire seed. Xiao Xian got up and was about to leave. He had said what he wanted to say. As for the choice, it was up to Yang Sui. As long as the people are here, the fire seed is here. As long as the people are here, the tribe is here. Think about it carefully. If you decide, you can go to the Yanjiao tribe to find me. You have been to the ferocious beast mountain forest. Xiao Xian knew that Yang Sui couldn't make up his mind in such a short time. This was a big decision that would determine the future of the whole tribe. Even if Yang Sui was the shaman of the Rain tribe, he couldn't make this decision alone. After Xiao Xian left, Yang Sui shut himself in the room and thought for a long time. He told the guards outside to keep away all disturbances. Once he was lost in thought, he would forget everything outside. When Yang Sui came out of the room, the Yanjiao tribesmen had already left. After standing by the fire pit for a while, Yang Sui invited several senior elders and the current chief to have a talk in the house. The other members of the Rain tribe didn't know what these senior elders talked about. They only knew that when they came out, they were all in a trance and kept their mouths shut. No matter how others asked, they didn't say a word. On the other side, the Yanjiao tribesmen who had left the Rain tribe were also heading back to the ferocious beast mountain forest. For the newcomers, many things here were very new. This was because the tribes here maintained even more ancient customs. The weapons they used were all stone tools, horns, bones, and so on. The metal knives in their hands had long been tied up in animal skin bags or clothes, and all the bronze weapons were covered. Therefore, when the Rain tribe rested, the people of the Rain tribe didn't see their bronze weapons. When they walked along the road, they also made a lot of rattan and woven baskets and tied them up again to cover their weapons. After all, there were too few bronze weapons here. It would be too eye-catching to carry them. They just came back and hadn't adjusted their condition, so they didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. About the fire seed, did you tell the Rain tribe shaman? Ao asked Xiao Xian. Yes, he can decide what to do, Xiao Xian said. Ao nodded. He felt that Yang Sui was a trustworthy person. He had helped their tribe too. Although it was for Xiao Xian's sake, after interacting with him, Ao felt that Yang Sui was more trustworthy than the other big tribes. Speaking of the fire seed, Ao himself found it hard to believe. When Zheng Luo and the others came ashore, Ao was still looking forward to finding the fire seed. At first, he thought the fire seed was the source of the fire seed. Later, he found out it was the power of the ancestral bone ornaments. But what about the fire seed? After Xiao Xian's explanation, Ao finally understood the secret. As a traditional chief of a tribe, Ao couldn't accept living without the fire seed. But looking at these new brothers, their strength was probably a little higher than the people in the tribe. This was the power of the fire seed. Moreover, the reason why the ancestors left back then was because of this. Now that they had returned, it proved that those who left back then were right. They had completed their mission and found a solution to prevent the fire seed from continuing to weaken. Listening to the matters on the other side of the sea, it was obvious that the situation on the other side was much better than on this side. A new era was coming. At this turning point, it was up to everyone to make a choice. While Ao was struggling, Xiao Xian was thinking. This time, once the two teams merged, there would be 2 chiefs, 2 shamans, and 3 team leaders. What should they do? Chapter 496. The Flaming Horn Tribe's team was too big and too eye-catching. Along the way, almost everyone who saw this team looked at them with a strange expression. Ao had already chosen a different route from the one they took. But with such a large number, it was enough to beat most tribes. This was the same size as when they first crossed the river to return to their homeland. They could not be ignored. In other people's eyes, the Yanjiao tribe was migrating again. This could not be hidden even if they wanted to. Other tribes would know when they talked about it. Did you know? The Yanjiao tribe is migrating again. One of the traders said. Migrating? I've seen it. It's been a while. I remember there weren't many people. I thought they were going to war with someone. Another trader was very confused. Not many. There were a lot of people. Old people, children, women, everyone. I saw it with my own eyes. Their team passed right in front of our tribe. Old people and children? I don't remember that. Yes. Why not? I counted, there were at least 5,000 people. That's a lot more than our tribe. What? 5,000? You must have counted wrong. I'm good at counting. There's no way I'm wrong. I don't believe it. Do you dare swear on your tribe's totem? Fine, I'll swear. Similar conversations appeared in many places. However, Yinjiao's team continued on their planned route. They did not know that they had started a heated discussion. Even if they did, they would not care. They were busy. Where would they find the time to talk nonsense with unimportant people? As they got closer to Fearsome Beast Forest, Zhang Luo and the rest could feel a familiar aura, as if it was one with them. Although they were in an unfamiliar environment, that direction gave them a warm and safe sense of familiarity. The totem power in their bodies surged as if they were eager to get there. The bright totem patterns on their bodies flashed, just like their mood at the moment. Although they had seen Zhang Luo's totemic patterns a few times in the desert, Ao and the rest couldn't help but sigh. Was this the result of merging with the fire seed? For those who had not merged with the fire seed, their totem tattoos were dark in color when they activated their totem power. Xiao Xian was an exception. But now, when these newcomers had bright totem tattoos flashing on their bodies, Ao and the others were envious. They were not envious of the bright totem tattoos, but the aura that these newcomers exuded was indeed stronger than theirs. Although the difference was not huge, it was enough to change many people's minds. Previously, when Ao heard that he had to fuse with the fire seed, he was unwilling. But gradually he began to waver. After the fusion, the potential of the warriors would be greater, and the flame seed would not continue to weaken. Who wouldn't want to have greater power? At the same time, outside the Fearsome Beast Forest, a large number of people had gathered in the Wuxia tribe. When Ao left with his people and a few fearsome beasts, the Wuxia tribe received the news. They also considered whether to take this opportunity to attack the Yinjiao tribe. Those who left were half of the Yinjiao's main force. As for the remaining half in the forest, the Wuxia tribe felt that they could take care of them. After the war in the desert, some people escaped. Among them were the slave masters who had worked with the Wuxia tribe in the past. The reason why the Wuxia tribe could develop to such a scale in a few hundred years was because of the slave masters in the desert. Although the situation in the desert had not completely stabilized, the smart people knew that soon only Rock Hill City would exist in the desert. There would not be any other powers that could threaten Rock Hill City. They could not return to the desert. Hence, those who escaped the desert turned their attention to the Wuxia tribe. They were very grateful that their ancestors had supported the Wuxia tribe. This gave them a way out, since they could no longer stay in the desert, and the other tribes did not trust the slave masters. Instead, they wanted to steal from the slave masters. The slave masters who escaped had only one choice. Now, the Wuxia tribe had the support of some of the slave masters who escaped. In addition to the Wuxia warriors, there were many slaves who could be used as cannon fodder on the front lines. However, the decision to attack the Flaming Horn tribe was met with opposition from some people, especially the slave masters. It wasn't easy for them to escape, so they didn't want to experience any more chaos. Attacking the Flaming Horn tribe would definitely cause them a lot of losses. Moreover, Yinjiao was a tribe living in the forest. They were poor and had poor land. Even if they succeeded, what could they do? Could they even snatch the territory inside? They did not want to live in a forest full of fearsome beasts. Even if they wanted to fight, they had to wait until they had more slaves. Otherwise, if the slaves became cannon fodder, who would protect the slave masters? In the past, the Wuxia chief was the only one who made decisions in the tribe. No one could object to his decisions. But now, with the addition of these slave owners, the influence of the Wuxia chief was diluted. The chief was no longer the absolute authority. Any decision had to be approved by the slave owners. Otherwise, they would not support or provide manpower or other things. The Wuxia chief had thought about rebelling, but the slave masters were too cunning. He did not dare to take the risk. He had been suppressing his anger. Now the Wuxia chief wanted to attack Yinjiao. These people jumped out to oppose him. They said that something must have happened since the Yinjiao chief took so many people out. Perhaps he was trying to lure them into a trap. Then they would surround them from the front and back. This was a trap for the Wuxia tribe. Trap my ass. The Wuxia chief wanted to strangle them, but he had to consider the slave master's opinions. He could only hold his anger. But as the days went by, they noticed that the fire seed in the fire pit was getting weaker, as if it was being suppressed by a stronger force. The new Wancher shaman persuaded the slave masters. Only Yanjiao could directly suppress the fire seed of the Wancher tribe. Finally, they came to a consensus. The slave masters provided some slaves. The Wancher chief gathered the warriors of the tribe and brought out the Wancher beasts. After a few days of preparation, they were finally ready to go. Looking at the green forest in the distance, the Wancher chief's eyes flashed with madness. He still remembered that the Yanjiao people had stood at the edge of the forest and said, "Go in. Those who enter the forest will die." "I'll go in." "So what?" "Not only will I go in, but I'll also step into Yanjiao's territory and take all your valuables and women." The sun was setting. This time the Wancher people planned to attack at night. During the day, the Yanjiao people were familiar with the forest and had the advantage. But at night it was different. They had heard that the Yanjiao people rarely went out at night. On the other hand, the Wancher beasts they brought out all had good night vision. Besides, the Wancher tribe had done a lot of night robberies. They were familiar with the job. They just needed to be careful in the forest. Yanjiao didn't have those beasts. Even if there were some left in the forest, they wouldn't be able to stop all 40 Wancher beasts at once. Very good plan. Listen to my orders. The Wancher chief raised his knife and was about to give the order when he heard a long, sharp cry of a bird in the sky. A white bird flew across the sky like a flash of white lightning. "That's the one from Yanjiao. Didn't it leave with them?" "Could it be?" someone in the team said. After the bird's cry, there was a wolf's howl and other beasts' roars. It didn't come from the forest. That's Yanjiao's team is back." The Wancher chief scolded. "What are you shouting for? Beat them even if they're back." It wasn't easy to get the slave masters here. How could they give up so easily? It was just a few thousand people coming back. They would beat them all the same. However, they soon realized that there were more than what they had expected. 2,000 people? 3,000? Seemed more than that. Even far away, the Wancher people could feel the fierce momentum rushing over. It was too fierce, too strong. They didn't want to face it at all. "No, we won't go," one of the senior slaves decided immediately. Although they came with the Wancher chief, their master had ordered them to go back immediately if they felt something was wrong. They didn't want to die with the Wancher people. It wasn't easy to get out of the desert and survive. They didn't want to act rashly before they had absolute confidence. The war in the desert had scared them out of their wits. After that senior slave said that, the other senior slaves all expressed their opinions. Although the current situation was indeed unexpected, Wancher's leader almost suffered an internal injury from holding back his anger. The Wancher chief opened his mouth a few times. He wanted to give the order to attack, but after thinking for a while, he swallowed it back. He forcefully withdrew his qi. Because he did it too quickly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression became ferocious. His eyes were full of struggle, and the veins on his arm, which was holding the stone saber, bulged. Fight? Yanjiao's main force was back. Not only were they back, but they also brought back reinforcements. If they attacked, they wouldn't gain anything. Plus, their people had betrayed them. How could they fight? Not fight. Where would their dignity go? Where would their prestige go? But in the face of reality, the Wancher chief had to stop his plan after weighing the pros and cons. Go back. The Wancher chief tasted the blood in his mouth. He suppressed his anger and said. However, because the Wancher leader's voice was not loud and the other Wancher people's attention was on the new team, they did not hear the leader's words clearly. Even if they did, they didn't react immediately. What? Chief, what did you just say? A person standing next to the Wancher chief asked. I said go back. The Wancher chief almost roared. He was so angry that he didn't know how to vent it. He spat out another mouthful of blood after shouting. Seeing this, the others didn't dare to ask any more questions. Although they didn't want to miss the best opportunity, they didn't want to continue. They still cherished their lives. Thus, when the Wancher people were sharpening their swords and planning to attack Yanjiao while Yanjiao was weak, the plan fell apart. In the Yanjiao tribe in Fearsome Beast Forest, Ta had already received information about the Wancher tribe's movements. Although the tribe had the fire seed as a line of defense, They couldn't completely rely on it. The fire seed's range was limited. They had to fight on their own. In fact, when the shamaness sent out so many people, he had different opinions. But since the shamaness made the decision, he didn't object. He ordered his men to prepare for the battle. Ta planned to ask the shamaness if they should transfer some of the tribe's people. After all, half of their main forces were gone. It would be difficult for them to fight. No one could predict what would happen. But after he asked, the shamaness still stood by the fire pit in silence. After a while she said, "No need." But Ta wanted to say something, but the shamaness said, "Everyone, don't prepare. This battle will happen sooner or later. But it won't happen today." Ta looked at the shamaness in confusion. He didn't understand what she meant. The shamaness didn't explain further. She just stared at the flames in the fire pit. The flames in the fire pit surged. Since the fire had suddenly started, it had not stopped. Moreover, the flames were getting higher and higher, and the fire was getting stronger and stronger. The shamaness stood by the fire pit and looked at the flames. Her weathered eyes were filled with tears, shining in the light of the fire. Although she didn't go out with Ao and the others, she knew what might happen. "It's been 1,000 years. The shamaness sighed. It had been 1,000 years. The Yinjiao tribe, which used to be known by everyone in its heyday, had fallen to a forgotten corner. Natural disasters, division, the lack of a fire seed, people's hearts wavered, and so on. So much so that they could only curl up in a small corner far away from the mainland, forcibly isolated. Although they didn't know how their ancestors felt when they carved those murals in the cave, from the words left behind by their ancestor, Zan, and from the animal skin scrolls passed down, they knew that generation after generation of flaming horns held on to hope. They hoped that one day, the glory of the past would return. One day they would return to their homeland. The glory would still be there. The fire of the flaming horns would never be extinguished. The glory of Yinjiao will return. Tears finally rolled down from the shamanist's eyes, leaving 2 lines of water stains on her wrinkled old face. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. With tears in her eyes, the shamanist stared at the flames in the fire pit and laughed hoarsely. She was hysterical and excited to the extreme. Ta, who was standing next to her, was dumbfounded. The usually calm and steady shamanist had gone crazy? The flames in the fire pit roared in the wind, and the 2-horned totem slowly appeared. The totem patterns on Ta's body also appeared spontaneously. Ta sensed something and looked in a direction in the forest. Just now, he had heard the chirping of birds and the roaring of beasts. They were sounds that he was familiar with. However, at this moment, he was thinking about something that had nothing to do with the roaring of beasts. He fixed his gaze in that direction, as if he was waiting for something. Not only Ta but all the Yinjiao people had a strange feeling. No matter what they were doing, they all stopped what they were doing and looked in the same direction. The sky gradually darkened, and the light of the sun gradually dimmed. The light of the fire gradually became more prominent, and even the silver light of the 2 moons couldn't dim it. In the dense forest that covered the sky and the sun, in the darkness as the sound of footsteps approached, some dense spots of light that resembled the color of fire seeds appeared. Chapter 497. Ta couldn't help but move towards that direction. People from other parts of the tribe also came over and stood behind Ta, looking in the direction of the forest. In the dark forest, there were many scattered lights moving. At first, they thought someone was lighting a torch, but soon they realized that it wasn't the fire from the torch, but the light from people. People had fire on them. There were many people in the forest, and they could tell from the sound of the footsteps. If Ta and the others weren't familiar with the footsteps of the giant beasts, and the breath of Ao and the others, and the strong sense of familiarity and strangeness, they would have taken up their weapons. Ta was stunned when he saw the face of the person in front. Xian. At this time, Xiao Xian and the others had already entered the tribe. The soldiers who were patrolling the area also came over. At first, they were worried that the Wanshi people would attack, but soon they realized that wasn't the case. They couldn't bring themselves to hate them at all, and when they knew who they were, they followed obediently. The shamanist's hand holding her walking stick was trembling. She felt as if her feet weighed 1,000 pounds, and every step was heavy. Her anticipation reached its peak, and she felt a little scared, like she was in a trance. On this seemingly ordinary day, the two tribes that had been separated for 1,000 years met again in the fearsome beast forest. After 2 years, Xiaoxian saw the people here again. "I'm back." Xiaoxian walked over and gave the shamaness a hug. Good. The shamaness' eyes glistened with tears. She looked at Xiaoxian carefully. After 2 years, Xiaoxian still looked the same, but he gave off a feeling that he had changed a lot, especially the obvious totemic patterns on Xiaoxian's body. She glanced at Xiaoxian, then looked at the people behind Xiaoxian. Ao and the other shamans were directly ignored. Their figures were too familiar. Moreover, when Ao and the others stood together with the newcomers, they were really inconspicuous. Their totem patterns were all glowing. As the shamaness, she could clearly feel the strong fire seed energy on these people, and it resonated with the fire pit in the tribe. However, the fire seed was nowhere to be seen. Realizing something, a thought flashed through the shaman's mind. However, this was not the time for him to think about it. The people in front of him were the people, all Yinjiao people, the people their ancestors had been looking forward to for thousands of years. Now they had finally arrived. Who is that old lady riding on Caesar's back and holding a walking stick? Ao strode over and briefly introduced these people to the shaman. Then he turned to Ta and said, "Go and tell everyone to prepare food and treat the new brothers well. Oh right, by the way, tell everyone to clear out some rooms tonight and prepare more appliances." "Okay." Tower nodded repeatedly. Although he wasn't clear about the specific situation, his intuition told him something. He looked at the group of newcomers again, then turned around and left to make arrangements. "There are many injured people in the team. We need to prepare more medicine," Xiaoxian said to the shaman. "Yes, I understand." It was a difficult journey from the other side of the sea to here. They had crossed the desert and traveled a long distance to fearsome beast forest. Zheng Luo's team was indeed very tired, but because of their excitement, they were very clear-headed. Especially when they saw the soaring flames in the fire pit. Everyone knelt down devoutly. It was a fire seed, a real fire seed. It wasn't a part of their bodies, but a fire seed that existed in the fire pit. It was a primitive fire seed that could be seen with the naked eye. Seeing the pyro seed was like seeing another home. All the anxiety and worries from before were swept away. Ao introduced the new team to the people of the tribe. The injured could finally get better treatment and recuperation, and the hungry warriors could finally let down their guard and eat to their heart's content. The people of the Old Haunt tribe were very enthusiastic. Although it was their first time meeting each other, and they were a little restrained and shy at first, they soon started chatting and laughing after gnawing on a few beast legs. On the way, Zheng Luo's team had a lot of communication with Ao and the others, so they were much more proficient in using the old language. They didn't need to make gestures when they stuttered a few words. Now they could brag smoothly. The women gathered together to talk about their own topics. The men gathered around the fire to brag. The children and the elderly were placed on the other side to rest. After all, there were too many people. Even if the tribe made room temporarily, it was impossible for everyone to live in a house. It was too late to build a house and no one had the energy to do so. But Zheng Luo's team didn't care. It was a warm place, not as cold as winter, and not as hot as the desert. They could sleep on the grass. Besides, they were all on the same side. With the protection of the fire seed, they could sleep soundly on the ground. After eating and drinking, they were easy to be satisfied. As for the others, they would deal with them after they slept. "Don't be afraid. If you don't have a place to sleep, we'll sleep with you on the grass." Mai patted a man of the same age as him and said, "Near the border where the tribesmen and wanderers lived, Yinji and Jiaowu each carried a few roasted beast legs. There were several large animal skin bags hanging from their waists, which contained some fruits and grains harvested last year." After knowing the identity of the newcomers, Yinji and Jiaowu were very happy. The arrival of these people would definitely make the Yinjiao tribe stronger. After all, they were all Yinjiao tribesmen. They were much closer than the wanderers from other tribes or the partners of other tribes. They were willing to trust the people brought by Xiaoxian. When the chief asked everyone to take out food, the two brothers carried out most of the stock. If there was no food, they could hunt again. But they couldn't let the newcomers starve. They heard that it was very difficult for them to come here. Many of them were so hungry that they were almost skinny. The two brothers were laughing and talking when they were suddenly stopped by someone. Hey Yindi Jiawu, wait. They looked over and saw that it was He Er, a wanderer they knew when they were in the Longboat tribe. Since they came to the old haunt, Yinji and Jiawu had awakened their totemic power. Their lives were much better, and the wanderers who had helped them also benefited a lot. He Er and the others were forced to come here. It was rare for them to see a little hope, so they followed the two brothers here. They didn't expect that although they lived in the ferocious beasts mountain forest, they could live a good life under the protection of the Yinjiao warriors. In addition, the Yinjiao tribe often hired wanderers to help them and paid them. For people without totemic power like He Er and the others, they were very satisfied. He Er also married a wanderer girl. At the beginning of this year they had their own child. But yesterday, someone in the wanderer's residence said that the Wanshur tribe was going to fight with the Yinjiao tribe. But half of the Yinjiao tribe's fighting force was out of the forest. The fighting force here was not enough. Maybe the Yinjiao tribe would be in danger. They had lived here for a long time, so they had heard a lot about the Wanshur tribe. They knew the style of the tribe. Therefore, the wanderer's residence was in turmoil. They had lived a good life for 2 years. Were they going to change places again? He Er and the others also wanted to ask Yinji and other Flaming Horn warriors they were familiar with, but they couldn't find anyone. The Flaming Horn tribe was tense, and the warriors who were patrolling the outermost area also kept their mouths shut, not saying a word. Some wanderers left secretly, but the patrolling warriors didn't stop them. Others saw this and left one after another. But He Er didn't leave. When someone asked him to leave with them, he refused. He didn't want to leave because he didn't know the specific situation. After waiting for a day, he finally met Yinji and his brother. Where are you going? He Er wanted to ask if the Yinjiao was going to fight with the Wanshur tribe. But now the two brothers didn't look like they were preparing for war. Instead, they seemed to have encountered something good. So he changed his question. There are some newcomers. We're going over there. Jiao Wu laughed loudly. Newcomers? Which tribe are they from? He Er asked. Of course they are from the Yinjiao. He Er thought they were Yinjiao wanderers who were scattered in other places, so he asked casually, how many have come? Why are you so happy? Jiao Wu showed 4 fingers to him. 40. He Er asked tentatively. Jiao Wu looked at him with disdain. 400. He Er was a little surprised. 400 was a lot. Jiao Wu continued to look at him with disdain. He Er stuttered. He didn't want to say that number. He thought it was impossible. Haha, 4,000. I can't talk to you anymore. They are waiting for us. Wait, are there really 4,000 wanderers? He Er asked. They are not wanderers. They are just like the people in the tribe. I heard they are quite powerful. Speaking of this, Jiao Wu was a little unconvinced. He thought that when those people recovered, he would fight with them. Watching Jiao Wu and his brother leave, He Er stood there in a daze. Then he patted his head and ran home. Although he didn't understand what Jiao Wu meant, he felt that they were very powerful. Looking at their state today, they didn't seem to be worried about fighting at all. Go? I won't go even if you kill me. If I don't hug such a thick thigh, where can I find a better one? As a wanderer, it was rare to encounter such an opportunity. He Er thought it was good to let those who were wavering leave. He wouldn't go anyway. The flame in the fire pit of the old haunt had been active for a whole night. Warriors were talking and laughing around the bonfire in every corner of the old haunt. Xiao Xian finally came back. Old Ku cooked a big pot of meat soup for him. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Xiao Xian took a shower and had a good night's sleep. He was more tired than the others. He used too much power to support the bone ornaments. Later, he recovered a little and unlocked the sapphire. He led the team all the way here. He was really tired. Xiao Xian slept for 2 days. He didn't wake up halfway, and no one came to wake him up. When Xiao Xian woke up on the 3rd day, there were many new houses in the tribe. Some were built with bricks, some with wood. The clay bricks couldn't be burned so quickly. After all, there were many newcomers, so some people built with wood first. Chapter 498. After Xiao Xian woke up, Old Ku told him that the shamaness had sent someone to look for him. Seeing that Xiao Xian was sleeping soundly, they didn't disturb him and told Xiao Xian to wait until he woke up. Putting down the bowl, Xiao Xian wanted to help wash the pot, but was chased out by Old Ku. The shamaness and the chiefs from both sides are waiting for you. Don't waste time here. Hurry up. Xiao Xian smiled and patted the head of Caesar, who was gnawing on a bone at the door. Xiao Xian then walked towards the shamaness. On the way, he saw warriors from both sides standing side by side. He didn't know what they were talking about. Not far away there was a brick house being built. There were people from both sides helping. In fact, Xiao Xian knew why the shamaness was in such a hurry to find him. The most important thing now was not the cooperation between the two teams, nor the use of the core seed. It was the issue of the fire seed. In the past, the tribe split because of the fire seed. Both sides had different opinions which led to the split. It couldn't be said that anyone was wrong. Both sides had their own reasons, and their starting point was for the sake of the Yanjiao tribe. However, after 1,000 years of separation, both sides were afraid. If there was another disagreement now, even if both sides were here, they could still split. Although both sides didn't reject each other, to truly merge into one would take time. They needed to make decisions. If there was a dispute over the fire seed, it would be much more difficult to merge. As the key person to unite both sides and the most special person in the entire Yanjiao tribe, Xiao Xian had to be consulted on such an important matter. There were people guarding outside the shamaness house. When they saw Xiao Xian coming, they quickly made way. When Xiao Xian entered, the atmosphere in the house was a little strange. No matter what, you didn't care about the safety of the old haunt and sent out half of your forces. This is extremely unwise. How would I know you would do this? I thought Xian would bring the fire seed over. What if we can't protect it with enough people? The desert is too dangerous. It's such a long road from there to the fearsome beast mountain forest. Not to mention the slave masters, even the people of other tribes. What if they have any ideas and want to kill us? What a joke. Let's not talk about whether we have the fire seed or not. Even if we brought it here, our warriors would be able to protect it. You guys laid down as soon as you came ashore. The two witches were arguing with each other. The leaders of the two groups of witches were sitting on both sides of the room. Some of them were looking at the ceiling, some of them were staring at the floor. Some of them were even playing with their fingers out of boredom. None of them interrupted, trying their best to minimize their presence. Guizhe, who was sitting next to the shaman, blushed. He couldn't persuade the shaman no matter how hard he tried. When they saw Xiao Xian enter, everyone in the room, whether they were looking at the ceiling or the floor, looked at him as if they had seen their savior. Xian, you're here. Xiao Xian, you're awake? Because of Xiao Xian's appearance, the two witches stopped talking. Although they still didn't look too good, they were much calmer than before. At the same time, they pointed their chins at the innermost seat, indicating for Xiao Xian to sit there. Xiao Xian noticed that there was a seat at the very top in the middle. There used to be two seats there, one for the leader and the other for the witches. But now the seats were changed. The leaders of the two groups sat on both sides, leaving only one seat in the middle in the front. Seeing that everyone was looking at him without any dissatisfaction, Xiao Xian didn't argue. He walked over and sat down. When they came back that day, the shaman gave the remaining 2 bone ornaments to Xiao Xian. Because he had led the group across the sea, he didn't know if the bone ornaments had used up too much power, but the ball on the bone ornaments seemed to have dimmed a lot. It wasn't until the shaman gave the remaining 2 to Xiao Xian that the 6 bone ornaments were strung together that the dimness faded a little. Now, Xiao Xian was wearing 6 bone ornaments and was the only elder on both sides. He was also an elder with a very special status. When the seat was placed, no one objected. They felt that this was how it should be. However, as the leaders and team leaders who had watched Xiao Xian grow up, they had mixed feelings. The little kid who came out of a cave at the foot of the mountain had grown to this level. What were you guys talking about just now? Xiao Xian asked. He obviously wasn't asking about what the 2 witches were arguing about. He was asking about something else. Ao quickly took over the topic, afraid that the 2 witches would quarrel again. He didn't know what was going on, but the 2 witches started to quarrel. In the past 2 days they had quarreled several times. We were discussing how to deal with the people who left a few days ago, Ao said. Because they knew that the Wuxia tribe was going to attack the Yinjiao tribe, some people panicked and fled because of the rumors. Among them were wanderers and Yinjiao warriors. None of the warriors who originally followed the tribe ran away. Those who fled were wanderers who came back to the tribe. They got power from the tribe, but they fled at the last minute. The Yinjiao didn't care about those who only wanted to share wealth, but didn't want to share hardships with others. So after compiling a list, they unanimously decided to blacklist these people and expel them from the tribe. They would never accept them again. When the tribe moved to the Ferocious Beasts Mountain Forest, some people fled, but later some came back and begged the tribe to give them a chance. The tribe gave them a chance because they were all Yinjiao blood. But now those people betrayed the tribe again. They shouldn't blame the tribe for being merciless. If they really went to war with the Wuxia tribe in the future and these people fled before the war, it would affect the tribe's morale. The sooner they were kicked out, the better. There's also the Pyro's decision. Ao did not continue after saying this. For the more conservative people here, without the fire seed, many people would feel uneasy. They couldn't imagine life without the fire seed. But these people had followed their ancestors down this path. Both sides grew up in different environments. Ao couldn't decide which to choose. He was conflicted. Not just Ao, the other team leaders were conflicted too. Some were worried about the future without the fire seed. Some were afraid that without the fire seed's restraint and cohesion, everyone would be separated. Everyone knew about the situation on the other side of the sea. Zheng Luo and the others didn't hide anything. Everyone in the room fell silent at the mention of this. The old shaman looked at the old woman who was about to speak. He spoke first. Xian, tell us what you think. Hearing him mention Xiao Xian, the old woman on the other side didn't say anything. She looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian's reply. To be able to borrow the power of the ancestors, he must be someone the ancestors trusted. Hence, Xiao Xian's attitude was very important. The fire seed's problem had to be solved. It was useless to put it aside. If it wasn't solved, the fire seed wouldn't be able to merge completely. The fire seed could merge with everyone's body, but it could also be removed. The method was written in the ancestors' notes. After removing it, the fire seed would merge completely. Should the complete fire seed merge with everyone's body again? Or should it keep the original fire seed? Xiao Xian thought for a while. He didn't say his decision immediately. Instead he said, the Rain Tribe. I believe most of you know about them. Those who had been to the Rain Tribe nodded. Those who hadn't heard about it also nodded. Xiao Xian continued. The Rain Tribe lives in the dry land near the desert. Without enough water, their survival will be very difficult. The ability of the shaman of the Rain Tribe to pray for rain was a major support for the prosperity of the Rain Tribe. The existence of the Rain Tribe may be much longer than that of some of the famous big tribes. Many people had heard about the ability of the shaman of the Rain Tribe to pray for rain, but not everyone knew about the long history of the Rain Tribe. The reason why the shaman of the Rain Tribe could pray for rain was that he borrowed the power of the fire seed of his tribe. But later he gradually lost the ability. I don't know when it started, but it became difficult to pray for rain. The number of failures increased until it was completely impossible. In the past hundreds or even thousands of years, the praying for rain of the Rain Tribe became a legend. Until 2 years ago, the new shaman of the Rain Tribe finally prayed for rain, but now it's still very difficult. Realizing what Xiao Xian was talking about, Ao and others were also shocked. The fire seed was born between heaven and earth. The fire seed would be extinguished like a torch. The way to keep the fire seed burning forever was to use the blood as the fuel. The continuous blood was the firewood for the fire seed. If one day the fire seed weakened and dissipated, the Rain Tribe would lose the ability to pray for rain. Then what would the Yinjiao lose? Power. If the Yinjiao people gradually lost their advantage of power, how could they survive in the tribes full of strong people? How could they hunt in the mountains full of ferocious beasts? The Rain Tribe was a lesson for them. Even if they couldn't understand it now, in the future thousands of years later, would the descendants of Yinjiao blame them? Would these people become the sinners of the Flaming Horn tribe? Xiao Xian looked at the people present and continued, I know what you are worried about. There is a sentence in the ancestral record, which was left by the ancestor Qi. Xiao Xian introduced the ancestor Qi to those who didn't know. When Yinjiao suffered a disaster, there were 3 generations of shamans. The old shaman abdicated and the new one took over. The old shaman took the history of Yinjiao and went deep into the mountains. He stayed in the cave, waiting for the day when the Yinjiao people came back and took the precious history out. The history had already been brought back by Xiao Xian. People in this old place knew about it. During the catastrophe, the newly appointed shaman and his successor Qi had left with the leader at that time to avoid the catastrophe. However, there were differences in opinion. The chief and Qi left with half of the people to find a new way out. The shaman took the rest of the people and left until the earth split open and a giant river separated them from the rest of the world. Zheng Luo's people were able to merge with the fire seed thanks to Qi. Qi was the pioneer. Speaking of Qi's words, Xiao Xian looked at the 2 shamans. These were all written in the ancestral notes. Not everyone could see them. There were many secrets in the notes and without permission, they could not be easily revealed. Seeing the 2 shamans nod, Xiao Xian continued. In the record, the ancestor Qi once said, "The fire seed hasn't disappeared. It still exists in the blood of the Yinjiao people. It will continue to exist with the blood of the Yinjiao people." After a pause, Xiao Xian continued. In addition, there was another sentence. As long as the people are there, the fire seed is there. As long as the people are there, the tribe is there. If the people's hearts were the same and there were no other thoughts, it didn't matter whether there was a fire seed or not. However, if the people's hearts weren't there, if they didn't side with the Yinjiao people, even if there was a fire seed, how much restraint could it have? The fire seed could restrain people, but it couldn't restrain people's hearts. For example, the traitor Dao Yu or the Yinjiao wanderers who gave up living here, or the Yinjiao warriors who got power but ran away when they heard a strong enemy was coming. Zheng Luo's branch had merged with the fire seed 1,000 years ago. However, without the cohesion of the original fire seed, they were still united. The Yinjiao tribe still fought for a piece of the world there. Moreover, they didn't have to worry about the fire seed being targeted. Even if someone left the tribe, as long as their heart was with the tribe, even if they went far, long and tired, they could still come back. This was a revolution. No matter which path they chose, they had to give up something. Outside the fearsome beast forest, inside the Wancher tribe, the young Wancher shaman stood by the fire pit, looking at the flickering fire seed. His eyes were gloomy and anxious. "It's afraid," said the shaman. "What?" The Wancher chief, who was standing not far away, was upset and didn't hear clearly. "The fire seed is afraid," said the shaman again. "Something is going to happen." Chapter 499. After the meeting that day, the leaders of both teams thought about it for a few days. They either locked themselves in their homes to think or gathered together to discuss. There had never been a problem that could make them so conflicted. In the past, the leaders of the hunting teams only needed to listen to the chief and shaman. They didn't need to think too much. This time they were given a chance to express their opinions, but it was such a difficult decision. Xiao Xian's words that day had a huge impact on them. No matter which path they chose, they had to give up a lot of things. All they could do was to weigh the pros and cons and choose the path that was most beneficial to the tribe. Therefore, after 5 days of conflict, they finally decided to choose the path of merging with the fire seed. When the final decision was made, no matter which side it was, they all breathed a sigh of relief. For the people of the old haunt, although it was hard to accept, they felt much more relaxed after the decision was made. The leaders of the hunting teams often asked Duokong and the others for advice. They wanted to know what it felt like to merge with the fire seed and how it was different from them who didn't merge with the fire seed. "How do you feel?" Being surrounded by so many people, Duokong smacked his lips. "I don't feel anything special. I just feel like there's a fire burning in my body when I'm hunting." Of course, this wasn't the feeling of being burned by the fire seed, but the totemic power provided by the fire seed was more direct and abundant. But that was it. Duokong couldn't say anything more. He himself didn't know the difference between merging with the fire seed and not merging with the fire seed. "The totemic patterns on your bodies are so bright," one of the leaders of the hunting team said enviously. "It's not good to be too bright. Every time we go out to hunt, We have to cover it with colored mud. I'm afraid we'll be exposed during the hunt. Haha. Although he said that, everyone could see the smug look on Duokang's face. It was as if he was saying, I'm shining, I'm proud. If it was the first batch of people, they would definitely have a lot of insights and could provide guidance to these people. Unfortunately, generation after generation, from the elders to the juniors, from birth until now, they had all gotten used to the life of having the fire seed fused into their bodies. To them, this was the most ordinary life. There was nothing special about it. Just like how they couldn't understand what it felt like to have the fire seed fused into their bodies, these people in the old haunt would only be able to understand the feeling of having the fire seed fused into their bodies. At this time, many people in the old haunt began to look forward to it. Some people even wondered if the color of the totem would change after the fusion of the fire seed. Merging with the fire seed was an important matter that concerned the rise and fall of the tribe, so they could not be careless. Although the two shamans often argued because of some ideological conflicts, they put aside their prejudices and carefully studied the notes left behind by their ancestors. No one else could see these things, so only the two of them could figure it out. When the time came, it would depend on them. No, there was one more. Xian, what do you think this sentence means? The old shaman pointed at a sentence on a scroll and asked Xiao Xian. He couldn't figure out the meaning of this sentence, but he didn't want to ask the old woman, so he asked Xiao Xian first. If Xiao Xian didn't know, then he would ask the old woman. In the notes left behind by their ancestor Qi, the method of merging with the fire seed was written in detail. Many of them were learned from the shamans of the Taiha tribe, but later, generations of Yanjiao shamans found some techniques and proposed some hypotheses to better merge with the fire seed. But hypotheses were just hypotheses, so no one could verify them. They could only remember these and make decisions based on the situation. After 2 days, not to mention the two shamans, even Xiao Xian's mind was filled with the fire seed. Old Ke saw that Xiao Xian came back tired every day, not physically but mentally, so he wanted to make something good for Xiao Xian. In the morning, he asked Xiao Xian, what do you want to eat? Xiao Xian chewed on a piece of barbecued meat and answered absent-mindedly, fire seed. Old Ke was stunned on the spot. When they finally came up with a plan, Xiao Xian temporarily got out of that state. In 7 days, the tribe will hold a sacrificial ceremony, a very important one. Every Yanjiao warrior must be there. Whether it's the patrolling warriors, the sick, or the children who haven't been weaned. The two shamans had jointly given the order, so no one dared to take it lightly. Now, the warriors who went out to hunt had all returned. No one went out these days, and the trading team hadn't gone out for a long time. Except for those who were blacklisted by the Yanjiao, everyone else, as long as they were of the Yanjiao bloodline, regardless of whether they had awakened their totemic power or not, had to be there for the ceremony. As the tribe grew bigger, there were many loopholes in the previous management. There might even be some people with bad intentions hiding among them. Therefore, other than the more important decision-makers in the tribe and the people they absolutely trusted, no one else knew about the merging of the fire seed. This was to prevent any changes from happening. But everyone could feel that something was about to happen. Some people said that the Yanjiao tribe was preparing for war, while others guessed something else. Chief Ao asked people to take note of those who liked to spread rumors and pay special attention to them in the future. If those people were really disloyal, Chief Ao wouldn't be merciful. The ceremony had been notified. The shamans also said that they didn't have to wear the ceremonial animal robes, but they had to be clean and tidy. They had to bathe and clean themselves properly. There would be warriors checking them, and those who didn't pass would be taken out and cleaned before coming back. This was a very important ceremony. It was the first complete Yanjiao tribe ceremony in 1,000 years. As the day approached, the atmosphere in the tribe became more tense. Even Zheng Luo and the others couldn't calm down. Duo Li asked his father in private, what will happen if the merging of the fire seed fails? In the end, Duokong didn't say a word and beat Duo Li up. How could he not be beaten up for provoking Duokong at such a critical time? 7 days passed quickly. According to the tribe's tradition, the ceremony would begin in the evening, after the sun had set. This time was no different. It was reasonable to say that the moon in the sky should be very bright at this time, but there were thick clouds in the sky. Especially since the evening, the clouds got thicker and thicker, completely blocking the moonlight in the sky. In the forest without moonlight, the night was very dark. Fires were lit everywhere in the tribe. The two shamans stood solemnly in front of the fire pit. The old lady had never experienced the summoning of the ancient fire seed in the fire pit. She didn't say much at this time and just followed the plan. This time, there were more than 4,000 people participating in the ceremony. Ao drew out a piece of land for them. According to the order, the leaders stood in front, the senior totemic warriors in front, then the junior totemic warriors and those who hadn't awakened stood at the back. Of course, those who had contributed greatly to the tribe would also stand in front. The rules were the same as before. Xiao Xian was the closest to the fire pit other than the two shamans. On the 6 bone ornaments around his neck, the 6 round beads were no longer as dull as they had been a few days ago. Instead, they were much more lustrous. With the incantation, the flames in the fire pit rose faster than before. However, after witnessing all kinds of strange things with the fire seed these days, everyone could watch calmly. The high flames lit up the surroundings. There was no music, no sacrificial dancers, and no 3 flames in the fire pit. Only the loud chanting of the incantation could be heard. After the flames in the fire pit rose, the totem pattern of the 2 horns appeared. When the totem patterns appeared, the totem patterns on all the totem warriors' bodies also appeared. Some of them had dark patterns, while the others had brighter totem patterns, which were very eye-catching. The flames in the fire pit rose higher and higher, swaying without wind. Even the people standing outside could hear the swaying sound of the flames. Xiao Xian felt the totem flame in his mind become active with the flames in the fire pit. The flame expanded a lot, and the shell that covered the totem flame also began to flicker. On the bone ornament's round ball there was a puff sound. The flame extended forward and connected with the flames in the fire pit. This time the flame giant didn't appear. Xiao Xian had a feeling that the flame that formed the flame giant had all merged into the fire pit. All the blood in his body seemed to be boiling, surging in his blood vessels. The totem power in his body was like a torrent, filling his whole body in the blink of an eye. Crack, 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 crack. The crisp sound of burning firewood, or the sound of rocks being burned and exploding, came from the fire pit. 6 fire veins appeared on the ground like burning magma, extending from the fire pit. They became thicker and thicker, as if they were going to forcefully crack the ground. Different from the fire veins in the previous sacrificial ceremonies, this time the fire veins on the ground were like growing roots, extending outwards. The closer they were to the fire pit, the thicker they became. The people standing here felt like they were standing on a rock flow. Near the fire pit, the distance between the 6 fire veins became very close as the fire veins became thicker. The fire veins and the flames in the fire pit bloomed together with unprecedented light. Crack, crack. It seemed like something was going to break out of the ground. With such a sound, the 6 fire veins that extended from the fire pit rushed out of the ground. They were like buried fire dragons that were about to break out of the ground, dancing up and down. Every time they rose and fell, a section of the underground fire vein rushed out of the ground. At this time, the stones in the fire pit all turned red. Crack, crack, crack. The stones that formed the fire pit made cracking sounds, and some flames rushed out of the ground. After the red flames rushed out, some blue flames followed. There weren't many, but they were like the calyx at the bottom of a flower, supporting the flames above. The flames that covered the entire fire pit gathered towards the center and rose into the air. The 6 fire veins that were dancing in the air also gathered towards the center, shrinking into the flames above the fire pit. The root of the fire that had been buried deep under the fire pit in the old haunt was out of the fire pit. Chapter 500. Xiao Xian had heard that the old haunt had Yinjiao's roots, which referred to the fire vein. If the fire seed was not connected to the fire vein, it would not be complete. Now the fire seed was connected to the fire vein, completely separated from the fire pond. Only some blue flame supported it, like a flower blooming above the fire pond. According to the plan, the first stage was to separate the fire seed from the fire pond. Now the first stage was successfully completed. Looking at the fire seed floating above the fire pond, the old shaman, Ao, and the others had complicated expressions. From today on, everything would change. In the future, he would never see the tinder in the fire pit again. The roots of the old haunt were gone. But now was not the time to think too much. The two shamans looked at each other, raised their hands and put them close to the flames in the fire pond. The second stage was about to begin. After the fire seed was separated from the fire pond, the second stage was to extract the fire seed from the bodies of Zhongluo and the others. The two shamans chanted incantations at the same time. Their power carried the blue flames, reaching into the fire pond. The flames in the fire pond swayed, as if summoning something. The magma-like totem patterns on the bodies of Zhongluo and the others glowed brighter and brighter. When they were at their brightest, it was as if there was a source of light shining inside their bodies. The light shone through the totem patterns on their bodies. It was extremely eye-catching. However, when the light reached its peak, sparks could be seen on the totem patterns. The sparks then expanded into flames, burning along the totem patterns. Finally, the flames separated from their bodies and gathered above their bodies. This was similar to the fire vein on the ground earlier. Starting from their hands and feet, as the flames left their bodies, the bright totem patterns began to darken and darken. Palms, elbows, arms, shoulders, ankles, knees, thighs. When all the flames gathered at the center of their eyebrows, the totem patterns on their faces turned dark. Only the center of their eyebrows shone brightly. It was not a big dot, but it was extremely bright like a miniature sun. Finally, this dot of flame left their bodies, floated out, and gathered back at the fire pit. Thousands of glowing spots like an upgraded version of fireflies on a summer night surged towards the fire pond. The flames floating above the fire pond glowed brighter with the influx of light, illuminating the surroundings as if it was daytime. When the last bit of light entered, the flames in the fire pond made a whoosh sound, as if satisfied and excited, jumping and howling. In the flames, the two-horn totem was especially bright, like the horns of a giant beast, eager to rush out and show its power. The fire seed was born from heaven and earth. When it changed, the people in the old haunt could clearly feel that heaven and earth was filled to the brim to a terrifying majestic aura. The second stage, the extraction of the fire seed, was completed. Seeing this, the two shamans were slightly relieved. However, they could not let their guard down. They had to be extremely careful with the last step. If the tribe had decided to keep the ancient fire seed, it would have ended here. Although it had been separated for thousands of years, the fire seed could finally be considered as complete now. After 1,000 years the fire seed was finally. After 1,000 years the fire was the fire. After 1,000 years the fire seed was broken to the fire to be to the people, S's. The guilt that had gathered in Zhongluo's and the others' hearts finally dissipated. The old shaman sighed. Since they had decided to take that path, they had to walk it with determination. They could not hesitate, and they could not be distracted. Closely following the second stage was the last step, which was also the most crucial step. They had to integrate the complete fire seed into every warrior's body. The sound of the shaman's incantation became louder and louder. The flames in the fire pond suddenly shot up into the sky, like a cloud-piercing knife suddenly pulled out from the ground. The tip of the knife pierced through the sky. This unparalleled divine weapon seemed to want to break through the endless night. The tip of the fire pierced through the clouds, illuminating the thick clouds above. The layers of clouds seemed to be ignited, and this change was spreading outwards from the center of the fire. The thick clouds gradually turned fiery red. The clouds above the old haunt had such a strange scene, and this change was still continuing. Under the sky, the originally pitch-black forest, the rolling mountains in the distance, the endless forest on the ground, and the winding river that led to an unknown end, everything was covered in a layer of fiery red. Under this strange phenomenon, flocks of birds flew up in the forest at night. Different species of birds mixed together, screeching. Regardless of whether they were from their own species, they all flew up into the sky, flapping their wings hard in the direction of the Yanjiao tribe. A large flock of birds flew into the distance like a moving cloud. The beasts that had already fallen asleep, or the predators that were hunting at night, were also startled by this strange phenomenon. They roared, their voices echoing in the boundless mountain forest. In the Wuxia tribe, the fire seed in the fire pond had shrunk to the size of a pea, as if it would go out at any moment. What's going on? What's going on? Tell me. Wancher's chief, Feng Wu, grabbed the shaman's clothes and shouted, his eyes filled with uncontrollable fear. Even the last time the Yinjiao tribe came here to ignite the fire seed, they had never encountered such a thing. This kind of power made them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Why did this happen? Looking up at the sky, the fiery red clouds had almost reached their tribe. Then looking at the forest, the sky was fiery red, as if the entire sky was on fire. Was this the power of the fire seed? Why did the fire seed have such power? Even in the other big tribes, such a thing had never happened before. The young Wancher shaman, who was being carried by Feng Wu, did not answer because he was also shocked. He had felt uneasy and thought that something would happen, but he did not expect such a shocking vision of heaven and earth. He couldn't help but think of a rumor he had heard in the desert. It was a rumor about the fire seed, about the ancestors of the slave masters. How could this be? He had racked his brains and used countless means to find the answer from the slave owners, but he had never succeeded. He had only touched a corner of it. But how did the Yinjiao people know? Where did they find the answer? The more the shaman thought about it, the colder his heart became. Their tribe was too close to the fire seed's suppression. Even the warriors of the Wancher tribe were affected mentally, let alone the fire seed. The aura between heaven and earth made them tremble, and their pores felt like they were about to explode. It was as if they were standing next to a fire pit in Yinjiao. The strong repulsion made them feel uncomfortable from the bones to the skin. In comparison, the slave masters were much more relaxed. Although they also felt uncomfortable in this atmosphere, they could take it better than the warriors of the Wancher tribe. At this time, even if no one said anything, they knew that something strange had happened in the forest. Only the Yinjiao tribe could cause such a change. Thinking of this, the slave masters could not help but regret. If they had known this would happen, they would have agreed to attack the Yinjiao tribe when half of the Yinjiao tribe left. Even if they could not take them down, they could have caused them a lot of trouble. Perhaps the change would not have happened so quickly. At the same time, the fire seeds all over the continent were also changing to varying degrees. In the Mang tribe, on the bamboo mountain, the shaman of the Mang tribe looked in the direction of the fearsome beast forest with a puzzled expression. Shaman, what on earth happened? I feel a little uncomfortable. The chief of the Mang tribe had been feeling uneasy since the beginning. He thought about everything that had happened recently but could not find the reason. Not only the chief of the Mang tribe, but other people also felt it. The higher the level of the totem warriors, the more sensitive they were, the stronger this feeling was. It made them unable to sleep. The shaman of the Mang tribe looked in that direction and carefully sensed it. This aura is from the Yinjiao fire seed. The Yinjiao tribe? What happened to them? The chief of the Mang tribe was confused. 2 days ago, he heard that the Yinjiao tribe went to the desert and brought back many people. He did not know who those people were or what the Yinjiao people were doing. He had also guessed that the Yinjiao people might have brought many slaves from the desert, but according to the information he heard, those people did not seem to be slaves. Until now, they had not figured out the answer. I don't know either. But the Yinjiao fire seed is indeed changing greatly. This change is very strange. I have never heard of it. The shaman of the Mang tribe said in a serious voice. Such an unknown change made him extremely worried. The Yinjiao people were not stupid. They would not joke about the fire seed. The Yinjiao tribe had been quiet for 2 years, so they thought they would keep a low profile and live in the fearsome beast forest. According to the ancestral records, the Yinjiao people's golden age had passed 1,000 years ago. The Yinjiao people's golden age was long gone. Even though they had been in the limelight a few times, it did not change people's impression of them. The Yinjiao people had disappeared for nearly 1,000 years. It was said that the Yinjiao people did not even know how to make pottery. They were far behind them. In the bottom of their hearts, these big tribes had never really taken the Yinjiao seriously. They only saw them as a tool to control the Wancher tribe. They had once felt sorry for the Yinjiao. After all, they had fallen from the peak. It was really sad. But more than that, they were glad that the peak Yinjiao was long gone. There was no strong Yinjiao, no arrogant and hot-tempered Yinjiao to compete with them. It was a blessing for these tribes to have one less competitor. But now, the shaman of the Mang tribe's eyelids kept twitching. Something unexpected was happening, but they did not know what was going on. In other tribes, the situation was similar to the Mang tribe. No matter if it was the ordinary warriors or the shamans in the tribe, they all had a strange feeling, especially the shamans of each tribe. They were very sensitive to the changes of the fire seed, and the unknown changes made them anxious. Even in the Rain tribe, which was far away from the fearsome beast forest, Yang Sui also felt the changes on the other side of the continent. Maybe because of the distance the feeling was not strong. But with his ability, he could tell which tribe the fire seed belonged to. He had felt the same feeling in the old land of Yanjiao. Has it started? Yang Sui walked to the fire pit of the Rain tribe and looked at the swaying flames. The change had begun. Chapter 501. Fearsome Beast Mountain Forest. In Yanjiao, changes were still happening. They weren't interested in the reactions of the other tribes on the mainland, and they didn't have the time to care about anything else. At this time, everyone was staring at the direction of the fire seed. There was only one voice in their minds, and that was the call of the fire seed. The two shamans controlled their power according to the method compiled in their ancestors' notes to control the changes in the fire seed. However, even though they were working together, they were exhausted after persisting for so long. Some of the ancestors' notes after Qi had recorded some possible situations when fusing the fire seed, as well as various deduced solutions. However, at this time the two shamans were hesitant. Even if they had a backup plan, they were still quite worried. They didn't expect that fusing the fire seed would consume so much power, and the backup plan would also consume a lot of power. Back then, their ancestor Qi had used up almost all of his power. Not long after the fusion, he passed away. The two shamans were already mentally prepared, and had written their last words before coming over. Just as the two shamans were about to burn their own lives to complete the last step of the fusion, they suddenly felt their bodies lighten. The gap that they couldn't fill was suddenly filled. The two shamans looked over in shock and saw Xiaoxian standing there next to the fire pit. Although he was one step further than the two shamans, the power coming from Xiaoxian's hand was much more abundant than the two shamans. Outside the azure flames, there was a layer of fiery red flame flowing from Xiaoxian's hand to the flames in the fire pit. In fact, Xiaoxian didn't expect this either. His actions just now weren't under his control. He had already stretched out his hand without realizing it. The power of the ancestor? Xiaoxian lowered his head and looked at the 6 bone ornaments hanging in front of his chest. The flames on the ornaments hadn't stopped and were still moving forward. In Xiaoxian's mind, the outer cover of the totemic flames was shining with a white light. The totemic flames inside the cover were burning fiercely, and it was unprecedentedly active. At the same time, the giant flaming saber above the fire pit that seemed to connect heaven and earth began to retract, just like the scene just now. The only difference was that the thick clouds in the sky still maintained the fiery red color. The giant blade that connected the heaven and the earth shrank into a floating flame, which was twice as big as the previous flame. If it was still in the fire pit, it would definitely overflow because the fire pit could no longer contain it. But soon the flame began to shrink, as if it was condensed. The smaller it was, the brighter it became. When it finally shrunk to the size of a soccer ball, it suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Then countless sparks shot out from it. It seemed to have no pattern, but if one looked closely, they would find that the sparks that shot out from the air were all aimed at one person with incomparable precision. Xiaoxian was the first to feel this change. He felt a bright light fuse into his body and enter the totem flame in his mind. The totem flame in his body soared, expanded and shone even brighter. Surging power surged within his body, swimming through his meridians and blood. Excited, the totem flame in his mind seemed to have been added with new firewood, as if a barrel of oil had been poured into it, burning fiercely. The totem flame in his mind was in a state of extreme excitement. If the totem power in his body was like a rolling river in the past, now it was like a vast ocean. This was not a simple change, but a qualitative and quantitative change. The abundant power was boiling in his body, as if steam was erupting from his pores. The airflow around his body was swirling and vibrating, as if countless blades were shooting out from his body. In the windless night, his sleeves and trousers were swaying, and the sound of animal skins or linen being cut could be heard incessantly. The reason why everyone was not required to wear the sacrificial animal clothing was that they considered the changes that might occur during the fusion. Where his feet were pressed against the ground, it seemed that there was a burst of air erupting from there, like layers of waves. The weeds on the ground were shattered and drifted away with the debris and dust. Xiao Xian could hear the sound of his blood flowing in his body and the strong beating of his heart. The power of the fire seed merged under his skin, seeped into his bones and flowed into his blood. His body was strengthened, and when he mobilized his totem power, the totem power flowing in his body became more condensed and wider. The power in his body changed from being passive when the fire seed was fused into his body, and gradually returned to his control, controlling the changes that would follow. The atmosphere was very intimate, and Xiao Xian could see countless flames scattered around in his special vision. It was like seeing delicious food after a starving meal, and Xiao Xian could not wait to absorb these flames. The fire seed had already been dispersed into every Yanjiao's body, and these flames were absorbed along with the fire seed. The more flames he absorbed, the stronger the fire seed in his body. Xiao Xian could clearly feel these changes, just like during the sacrificial ceremony, when everyone absorbed the scattered flames during the flying flame stage. However, after observing the others, Xiao Xian found that this was different from the sacrificial ceremony. The amount of flames he absorbed had nothing to do with the distance from the fire pit. Some people standing at the back even absorbed more than those standing at the front. This change might be related to talent and strength. Everyone had the same fire seed in their body, but their strength might not be the same in the future. Talent and how much effort they put in would all make the final result different. How far they could develop, and whether they could make the fire seed in their body stronger, depended on the individual. In the past, he had always thought that the stronger the fire seed, the stronger the person would be. But now that he had truly fused with the fire seed, Xiao Xian found that this was not the case. The stronger the person, the stronger the fire seed. In the days to come, these changes would continue. Where did the dissipated power of the fire seed go? If it still existed between heaven and earth, then they would be able to capture the scattered power again. Perhaps this was what people had always wondered, the growth of the fire seed. At the same time, Xiao Xian noticed another very obvious change. The totemic patterns on the surface of his body had become wider and wider, and the color had changed. The totemic patterns on the people from the old haunt were originally darker, but for those who had fused with the fire seed, their totemic patterns were a brighter lava color. Xiao Xian's totemic patterns were even brighter than theirs. But now the totemic patterns on everyone's body had changed. It wasn't as dark as the former, nor was it as bright as the latter. Instead, it was a deep purplish black, but it wasn't a pure color. If one were to look closely, they would discover that the patterns were like a layer that covered the flames, blocking out the light. After the complete fusion, the changes in the totemic patterns were more restrained, but they gave off a more dangerous feeling. This was because the totemic patterns were more suitable for the forest. When they covered the entire body, it was more like a hidden protective color. Like the stripes on a beast, like the evolution of a species' survival. The fire in the fire pit that lit up the forest gradually dimmed. The floating flames had disappeared. The fire seed would no longer burn in the fire pit. Seeing such a fire pond, many people felt a sense of loss. But very quickly they became excited again. They could feel the changes in their bodies. It would make them stronger, and it would also make them live longer. Zhang Luo and the others felt it the most, their eyes burning with passion. From now on they would no longer be called sick, no longer short-lived ghosts. They could fight for longer in the forest. Their battles would not end here. The flames in the clouds in the sky gradually weakened, and everything on the ground returned to darkness. Looking at the fire pit that no longer had any light, the shamaness knelt and kowtowed. The others followed suit, using the tribe's highest ceremony to pay tribute to the departing fire seed. From now on they would usher in a new era. This day would leave a deep mark in Yanjiao's history. This day would be marked as Yanjiao's Memorial Day for the fire seed. Every year on this day, a ceremony would be held to commemorate the fire seed's change. This was the most important day after the ceremony at the beginning of each year. Yinjiao will return to its peak. The glory they had lost would be reclaimed. As for the Yinjiao wanderers who left, when they abandoned the Yinjiao tribe, they lost their chance to rejoin the fire seed. The changes in Yinjiao were naturally felt by the shamans of each tribe. How could this be? The shaman of the Mang tribe was shocked. He lost his composure. What's wrong? What happened to the Yinjiao tribe? The chief of the Mang tribe asked quickly. Although he could feel the changes, he did not have the sensitivity of the shaman. The flaming horn's fire seed has disappeared. The Mang shaman's voice was shaking. He was shocked to the core. Disappeared? How is that possible? The chief of the Mang tribe almost jumped in shock. Yes, how is that possible? No matter how useless the Yinjiao tribe was, it was impossible for their fire seed to be extinguished so quickly. Moreover, the changes just now did not seem like the fire seed was extinguished. The chief of the Mang tribe felt that it was impossible. No, it's not really gone. It's still here, but it exists in a different way. The shaman's voice was almost inaudible. He was deep in thought. Not only the shamans of the Mang tribe, but the other tribes were also shocked. However, the shamans of these tribes were not the only ones who were shocked. In the desert, in the expanded Rock Hill city, a similar conversation was taking place. Did you feel it? The fire seed is abnormal. Yes, they have found a way to rejoin the fire seed. If they were only suspicious when they heard the news from the Yinjiao tribe, now they were 100% sure. The Yinjiao tribe is really a magical tribe. Shu looked in the direction of the Flaming Horns tribe, but quickly shifted his line of sight to the other side, in the direction of the sea. The world will change. What we can do is to gain more bargaining chips before it changes, said a voice whose age could not be determined. Chapter 502. The fusion of the fire seed required time to get used to it, to fully absorb the energy that was not fully absorbed. Hence, in the next 2 days, the tribe was much quieter. Other than the warriors on patrol duty, everyone else stayed in their own houses to continue the fusion process. Xiao Xian did not know how much the others had changed, but he knew his own and Old Ku's changes. These 2 days, Old Ku seemed to have nowhere to vent his energy. He could spend the whole night in the stone house, and the next day, he would cook meat soup and roast beast legs. In the past, Old Ku had to use crutches to move around, and Caesar had to carry him if he wanted to walk further. Now, Old Ku threw away his crutches and jumped around the house, jumping around energetically. Xiao Xian was worried that Old Ku would get tired from jumping around, but Old Ku enjoyed it. This is really good, don't you believe me? If you don't believe me, I'll show you every day. You look much more energetic now, you look radiant. Xiao Xian smiled. Xiao Xian was not trying to flatter him. Old Ku used to have more white hair, but now he had more black hair, and only a small part of his hair was white. If he took good care of his hair, Xiao Xian was not sure if his hair would turn completely black one day. The smile on Old Ku's face started to pile up. After the fusion of the fire seed, Old Ku had changed a lot. In the past, Old Ku's health was not good. He had lost a leg while hunting, and later, he made a living by making stone tools. His life was not good and he was sick. Although Xiao Xian had been collecting herbs for him to recover, it was not as obvious as the fusion of the fire seed. The others did not change as much as Old Ku. No matter what, a good change was always gratifying. After breakfast, Xiao Xian went out and bumped into Duokong and the others. Duokong and Guang Yi were talking about totemic patterns. I still have a lot of colored mud. I didn't expect that after the complete fusion of the fire seed, I wouldn't need to use it at all. In the future, I won't need to use it when I hunt. Although there was one less problem, Duokong still couldn't get used to it. He packed his things and prepared for the hunt the day after tomorrow. He kept feeling like something was missing. But they had to get used to it. Although the totem runes were not as bright as before, they knew that these runes were the most suitable for hunting among the 3 runes. Before Guang Yi could say anything, Duokong continued. Actually, after a while, it's pretty good. I heard that this entire forest is ours. In the future, we won't have to worry about intruding into other people's territory. We can hunt freely, haha. Guang Yi shook his head. ignoring the overly excited Duokong. He clasped his hands behind his back and planned to find someone else to spar with. He hadn't moved for 2 days, his hands were itchy. They had to wait until the day after tomorrow to go hunting. Xiaoxian walked around to see how everyone was adapting. Without the fire seed, the people of the old haunt felt a bit strange. They gazed at the fire pit without any light from afar with a disappointed and frustrated expression. They felt that without the fire seed, it was as if they had lost their roots. But in order to walk towards a brighter future, this change had to be made. Plus, people were the foundation of the tribe. As long as the people were there, the hearts were there. Everything was there, no matter where they lived in the future. After walking for a while, Xiaoxian walked towards the fields. When they came back from the other side of the sea, they brought back many seeds. They were all good seeds given to them by Jiju. In the past, Xiaoxian always thought that they only ate normal food. Later, he found out that many tribes, especially the bigger ones, had some precious seeds. However, they protected them very tightly, as if they were afraid that others would find out. Even if they traded, they rarely took them out. Most of the seeds that the trading teams brought back were normal seeds. The food they grew was basically for the people in the tribe who hadn't awakened their totemic power. But now the seeds they brought back were different. The ones in charge of planting were still Chi-Chi and the others. They were familiar with it. The people in charge of planting also learned from them. In the future, the tribe's fields would definitely expand. If they didn't learn quickly, they wouldn't have enough manpower. Seeing Xiaoxian, Chi-Chi hurried over and bowed respectfully. She respected Xiaoxian from the bottom of her heart. Without Xiaoxian, they wouldn't have been able to come to the old haunt. Grand Elder! Grand Elder! The others hurried over. In the past, Xiaoxian was the only elder. Now he was the Grand Elder. Although he was still the only elder, it wouldn't be long before there would be more elders in the tribe. The two shamans had already discussed that after training Guizhe, they would step down. After all, there would always be conflicts between the two shamans. Not to mention their views, they would often quarrel over how they addressed each other. Sometimes, when they heard people call them shaman, they would respond and misunderstand each other. The old lady wanted the old man to change the way he addressed her. The male shaman on the other side of the sea was called Wu. She wanted the old man to just call her Wu. Unfortunately, the old man refused. Why should he change the way he addressed her? It's a name passed down from our ancestors. Why did he have to learn from the slave masters? He wouldn't change it. The old lady was so angry that she almost hit him with her cane. Other than these small conflicts, they felt that at their age, they were lucky to be able to live for a few more years with the fire seed fusion. It was time for them to step down. It was time for the young people to take up the mantle. The two of them would step down as elders. Ever since the fire seed fusion, Guizhe had inherited the power of inheritance and was valued by the old lady. Perhaps it was because he had been learning from the shamans for a long time, or because he was talented. It was rare for the two shamans to have the same attitude in training their successors. Sometimes they would disagree and quarrel. So now Guizhe was running between the two sides. Today he would learn from the old man and tomorrow he would go to the old lady. The pharmacy was handed over to other people. Xiaoxian also went to help when he had time. He taught the new apprentices in the pharmacy. The alligator snapping turtle grew bigger. It ate and slept every day. Although it ate medicinal waste, it grew well. Xiaoxian wanted to pry the turtle shell off and make it into armor. As for the chiefs, the two chiefs didn't step down for the time being. However, they also said that when the new chiefs came out, they would step down and become elders like the shamans. They would only participate in the discussion of the tribe's important matters and wouldn't care about anything else. The new leader would be chosen from the 3 team leaders. That was why Duokong, Guizhe, and Tao were doing their best to perform. The reason why Duokong was looking forward to the hunt was because he wanted to show his strength as soon as possible. Although there would be 4 more elders soon, Xiaoxian's special position was still unsurpassed. So the Grand Elder was chosen. He was also the only elder who could control 6 bone ornaments. The other elders didn't have any ornaments. This was different from the past. Even if Xiaoxian took out the 6 ornaments to share, the others wouldn't want them. They couldn't light up the ornaments before, and felt that they didn't have the right to wear them. No one wanted to challenge the Grand Elder's position. So now when the people in the tribe saw Xiaoxian, they would call him Grand Elder. Xiaoxian looked at the situation in the field. How much did we plant? We planted everything suitable for this season. Chi-Chi brought Xiaoxian around the field and told him about the results. Chi-Chi went to the shamans to collect the seeds. The two shamans divided the work. The old man was in charge of the seeds and the old woman was in charge of the salt. They brought a lot of seeds when they came. When the Guizhe took over, the two shamans would give the seeds to the Guizhe for safekeeping. At first, the shamans thought that Xiaoxian was the one who got the seeds, so Xiaoxian should be the one keeping the seeds. However, Xiaoxian would go hunting with the hunting team. Even if he wasn't hunting, he wouldn't sit in the house all day waiting for people to find him. Other than the people working in the fields, there were also many people working in the animal pen. The two teams often gathered to exchange their experiences. When Xiaoxian went over, the person who took care of the duck shed was still regretting that he didn't bring the green ducks over. Xiaoxian was about to check on the wild boars that he had caught during the hunt a few days ago. Xiaoxian heard someone calling him and looked over. It was the two chiefs and the three team leaders. Were the five of them gathered together to discuss something? What are you going to do? Xiaoxian walked over and asked. Ao didn't say anything. He just tilted his head slightly in one direction. Xiaoxian understood. That direction was where the core seed was placed. The core seed was a secret in the tribe. Even the metal objects they brought back were mostly put aside. Duokong even played with stone axes to his heart's content. He always thought that stones were too easy to break. How could he hunt? But ever since he saw Xiaoxian use stone tools, Duokang's impression changed. When he came here, he understood the wonders of stone tools better. Xiaoxian didn't ask Tua and Lei to bring the core seed back to hide it. Come, let's go take a look. Ao called Xiaoxian. The six of them walked over. Because the core seed was too dangerous, it was placed far from the tribe. It would take some time to get there. On the way, Ao thought for a moment and asked Xian, do you feel that when you eat the 1,000-grain gold, the fire seed's power in your body fuses faster? Ao ate the 1,000-grain gold later than the others, but because of this, the feeling was even clearer. Xiaoxian really didn't feel it. Perhaps he was different from the others. The shamaness once said that Xiaoxian was different from the others, whether it was his awakening or the appearance of his totemic patterns. So what the others felt, Xiaoxian might not be able to. He looked at the others. Zhengluo, Duokong, Ta and the others all agreed. Xiaoxian thought back to Jiju's words. That should be it. Jiju once said that the 1,000-grain gold would grow in the most suitable direction. Perhaps because we need this change, it will grow in this direction. It comes from the same plant as the 1,000-grain gold in Jiju's place. But its growth is very different because it grows in Yanjiao land. 1,000-grain gold, what a magical thing. Ao sighed. They didn't have to envy the other tribes for their precious crops. Their tribe had more treasures, especially the 1,000-grain gold. It was the treasure of their tribe. They wouldn't share it with others. Even if they offered more in exchange, they wouldn't give it to them. Chapter 503. Not long after leaving the tribe, Xiaoxian saw the mountains where Cha-Cha used to rest. There were still scratches left by the eagle's claws on the mountain walls. When Cha-Cha first came to the old haunt, it preferred high places and didn't like to be surrounded by people. After all, it didn't have much contact with the Yanjiao people, unlike the other ferocious beasts. It had encircled several mountains around the tribe. When Xiaoxian came back, he didn't see Cha-Cha. He learned from Ao that Cha-Cha flew around the desert after sending Tua and Lei back to the old haunt. Then it ran to the Hui tribe and took away a few of their eagles. However, the people of the Hui tribe also said that the giant mountain eagles were probably going to Eagle Mountain in a group, so Ao and the others were not too worried. They didn't know much about the giant mountain eagles, but Cha-Cha had been there once and had experience. Although they didn't know which path they were going to take, since they were all in a group, it should be safe. Not long after this winter, the traveling team of the Hui tribe from the grassland came to the ferocious beasts mountain forest. They also sent a message that several eagles of their tribe had returned, but they didn't see Cha-Cha. They didn't say much, as if they wanted to say something but stopped. Ao didn't think much about it because of the strange fire seed. They went to Eagle Mountain but didn't appear with the other eagles. Did they not leave Eagle Mountain? Or did they leave Eagle Mountain and go somewhere else? Xiaoxian didn't know. When Xiaoxian asked about it, Ao regretted it. After all, they didn't ask much at that time. The people of the Hui tribe didn't stay here for long and left with a message. If Xiaoxian wanted to figure it out, he had to go to the grassland and ask the people of the Hui tribe in detail. The communication between the people of the Hui tribe and the giant mountain eagles was very normal. They could understand the meaning of the giant mountain eagles. It was impossible for several eagles to go together without any news. The people of the Hui tribe definitely knew more about Cha-Cha. Xiaoxian didn't blame Ao and the others. After all, the situation was special. Besides, Cha-Cha had a bad temper. In the tribe, other than the old Ku and the shaman, it didn't want to talk to anyone else, let alone talk to them. When things here were settled, Xiaoxian planned to go to the grassland. After about half an hour, Xiaoxian could feel some changes. When you asked Tua and Lei to bring the core seed back, we knew it was very dangerous, but we didn't expect it to be so lethal. Ao pointed at the thinning forest in front of them. Due to the soil and stone of this mountain, there weren't many plants. The higher they went, the less greenery there was. This was why Ao decided to put the core seed here. But it was so sparse it was like a bald patch in the forest. It was frightening. There were not many plants here, and it was even rarer to see ferocious beasts on the mountain. Ao had been here many times. Occasionally, he could see 1 or 2 pheasants passing by below the mountainside. They did not live on this mountain, but came from other mountains. The core seed was placed on the mountain. There were originally some small caves, but we expanded them and put some good stones inside. Ao told Xiaoxian everything in detail. Zheng Luo and Duokong listened on the side. Their faces were red, and they looked like they wanted to rush over immediately. It was obvious that they weren't calm at all. On the other side of the sea, the core seed was controlled by the slave masters. All the bronze wares they had were bought from the slave masters or traded with merchants. They had never seen the core seed before. They didn't even know about the core seed, only vaguely aware of it. However, they thought it was too far away, so they didn't pay much attention to it. They didn't expect there to be a core seed in the old haunt. With the core seed, will we be able to make more gold wares? Duokong rubbed his hands in anticipation. Technically, yes. But no one in the tribe has tried it before. We don't know if it'll work. We'll have to try, answered Xiaoxian. When they were on the other side of the sea, the tribe's blacksmiths only modified weapons based on bronze wares. Even though Gongjia Hung had taught them some techniques, he had never explained smelting techniques based on ores. The Yanjiao tribe could only use the theories Xiaoxian had provided. Xiaoxian's smelting techniques were a combination of the slave master's smelting techniques and the words he had taken from Gongjia Mountain. Back in the desert, Xiaoxian had snuck into Snowfield City and read about smelting in the place where the ancient scrolls were kept. Not only did it talk about the core seed, it also explained where the ores used for smelting came from. It also mentioned that the better the quality of the ores, the shorter the smelting time and the higher the metal content. Xiaoxian had recorded the slave master's failures and their successes. As for the words he had taken from Gongjia Mountain, they were very useful too. For example, there was the method of observing qi, the ratio of different metals used in smelting weapons, and the ring diagrams left behind by the Yi family's ancestors. The others did not understand the Yi family's ring diagrams, so they did not read them. However, the techniques and experiences mentioned earlier made the 2 chiefs and the 3 team leaders' eyes light up. I've heard from the Gongjia family that there's a type of green-faced fang beast whose blood is very useful in making weapons. The swords it makes can easily cut through stone, said Xiaoxian. Really? The others looked at Xiaoxian. I've heard about it. I've never seen it with my own eyes. What does the green-faced fang beast look like? We can't let it go when we hunt in the future, asked Zheng Luo impatiently. The metal wares they used were not the best. Most of the metal wares they used were not even as good as the high-quality stone wares in the old haunt. However, whether it was the metal wares they used or the stone wares used in the old haunt, they all had many shortcomings. However, if these shortcomings could be improved, they would be able to make better metal wares, which would make it easier for them to hunt and more confident, which would be very satisfying. According to Hung, the green-faced fanged beast isn't big. It has a green face and thick skin. It has hooves but no horns and 2 long fangs. It often jumps around the mountains and looks very fierce. It's also very aggressive and often attacks other beasts. It's a herbivorous beast. As Xiaoxian spoke, the 5 of them did the same thing at the same time. They searched for animal skins or cloth to write down. Duokong found a piece of cloth but did not bring a pen or paint. He scratched his head and said to Zhengluo, "Boss, I'll copy after you write it down." Zhengluo looked up at him but did not speak. "Don't worry, there's no rush. I'll fill in what I missed when we get back," said Xiaoxian as he continued walking up the mountain. There were very few plants growing on the ground here. However, there were a few types of unknown grasses. They didn't look very conspicuous. If they were placed together with other flowers and plants, they would be easily overlooked. However, here, when other plants couldn't survive, they were still standing strong. Xiaoxian went over to pick some. He would study them when he got back. If they could withstand the core seed's influence and still grow here, they might be a rare medicine. It might be useful against the core seed's damage. It's there. Ao pointed ahead. There was a cave blocked by a large rock. There were no guards around the cave because the guards were all at the foot of the mountain. That way they could avoid harm. Even if it was just a small injury, it would be a big problem in the long run. Plus, there were no other tribes in this forest. Other than the fearsome beasts, there were no other outsiders. There was no need to be so strict. The closer they got to the cave, the more danger they felt. It was uncomfortable and their bodies were emitting danger signals. Zhengluo and Duokong were not used to seeing the core seed for the first time, but they could not suppress their excitement. Core seed, it was the core seed. Ao walked over and removed the stone that was blocking the entrance of the cave. However, he did not go in immediately. Instead, he opened a large animal skin bag that he had brought along. "Put this on." Xiaoxian took a simple gray robe from Ao. It was made of worm skin. Xiaoxian brought back 3 rolls of worm skin from Eagle Mountain. He only used 1 and left the other 2. After Tua brought the core seed back, he followed Xiaoxian's instructions and found the worm skin to make these protective clothes. At that time, the soldiers who moved the stones in were all wearing these clothes. The 6 of them put on the clothes and walked in. There were some glowing water moonstones in the long passage. They did not need a torch to see what was inside. As they continued to walk, they arrived at a place with a larger space. It was circular in shape. Ao and the other warriors had worked hard to excavate this space back then. It was man-made. The core seed was in the middle. It was not much bigger than a fist but was extremely dangerous. "That's the legendary core seed?" Zhengluo's throat twitched. He wanted to touch it but knew it was too dangerous. The closer he got, the more he felt a burning pain in the places not covered by the worm skin. There were stones around the core seed. The tribe spent a lot of time looking for stones in the forest. It was rare that they did not use the good stones to make stone tools. Instead, they moved most of them here. Xiaoxian looked around. Using the results from the ring diagram, he walked to a spot and looked at the stones. At this spot, the stones were the same distance away from the core seed. Many of them had irregular gold on their surfaces. This was where the core seed had the most copper. This was where the copper mine was produced. The magical core seed. They moved some of the copper out of this location, and then moved out a large stone from a different location, bringing all these stones back to the tribe. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.